The invisible algorithm your eyes follow before you even think. Something strange happens every single day, and almost nobody notices it. You open your eyes in the morning, step into a room, unlock your phone, or walk down a busy street, and within a fraction of a second your gaze lands somewhere specific. It feels effortless. It feels like you chose where to look, but that feeling is an illusion. Before your conscious mind even realizes what is happening, your brain has already decided what deserves your attention. There is an invisible algorithm running inside your head every moment you are awake, and it silently controls far more of your life than most people ever imagine. Think about the last time you entered a crowded place. Hundreds of faces, dozens of conversations, bright signs, moving cars, flashing screens, and countless tiny details surrounded you all at once. Yet somehow your eyes did not treat everything equally. They immediately searched for a familiar face, an empty chair, an exit, or something that matched what your mind secretly considered important. You never gave yourself a command to do that. It happened automatically. By the time you believed you were making a choice, your brain had already made one for you. This becomes even more surprising when you realize your eyes are not smoothly scanning the world like a camera. They constantly make tiny jumps from one point to another. Between those jumps, your brain fills in missing information so perfectly that you never notice the gaps. Your experience feels continuous, but behind the scenes your mind is working at incredible speed, predicting where your eyes should move next and deciding which pieces of reality are worth keeping. Everything else is quietly pushed aside before it ever reaches your awareness. Imagine trying to read this while paying equal attention to every letter, every sound around you, every sensation on your skin, and every object in your peripheral vision. You would barely finish a single sentence. Your brain avoids that overload by filtering reality before you even know it exists. It asks one simple question over and over again: what matters most right now? The answer changes from moment to moment, and that answer becomes the map your eyes follow. Scientists who study attention have found that this filtering system depends on two powerful forces working together. One reacts instantly to whatever stands out. Bright colors, sudden movement, loud noises, or unexpected shapes naturally pull your eyes because your survival system evolved to notice anything unusual. Long before modern cities and smartphones existed, noticing sudden movement could mean the difference between life and death. Your brain still carries those ancient instincts today. That is why a flashing notification can steal your attention even when you promised yourself not to check your phone. The second force is even more fascinating because it comes from inside you. Your goals, memories, emotions, and expectations quietly tell your brain what deserves priority. If you are looking for your friend in a crowd, your eyes suddenly ignore hundreds of strangers while becoming incredibly sensitive to one familiar face. If you are thinking about buying a particular car, it suddenly feels like that model is everywhere. The cars were always there. What changed was your invisible algorithm. Your brain updated its priorities, and your eyes obediently followed. This is also why two people can experience the exact same place and walk away with completely different memories. One person notices smiling faces and helpful strangers. Another notices rude behavior and tension. One remembers opportunities. The other remembers problems. Neither person is lying. They are simply seeing different slices of the same reality because their brains are filtering information through different emotional and mental patterns. Your emotional state has an incredible amount of control over this process. When you feel anxious, your eyes naturally search for possible threats. Neutral expressions begin to seem suspicious. Small problems appear much larger than they really are. When you are happy or excited, your attention shifts toward possibilities, rewards, and positive experiences. The outside world has not changed in those moments. The hidden rules guiding your attention have. This is exactly why modern technology is so effective at capturing your focus. Every application, advertisement, and social media platform competes for the same invisible algorithm. Bright colors, moving images, familiar faces, and perfectly timed notifications are not random design choices. They are carefully built to interrupt the natural flow of your attention. The goal is not simply to make you look. The goal is to convince your brain that this new piece of information matters more than whatever you were already doing. Once your eyes stop, your thoughts often stop there too. The unsettling truth is that attention shapes your reality more than reality shapes your attention. Whatever repeatedly captures your gaze begins to feel important. Whatever your brain consistently ignores slowly disappears from your world, even if it has always been there. Every day, your invisible algorithm decides which moments become memories, which people become significant, and which opportunities never even enter your awareness. Most people spend their entire lives believing they freely choose what they see, never realizing that the deepest decisions were already made long before they ever thought they were looking. Why your brain chooses one object and ignores 100 others. Imagine standing in the middle of a crowded shopping mall during the busiest hour of the day. People are walking in every direction. Music is playing through speakers. Conversations overlap with footsteps. Bright advertisements flash from every corner. Stores are filled with colorful products. Yet somehow your attention settles on just one thing. Maybe it is a person waving at you. Maybe it is a familiar logo. Maybe it is a message lighting up your phone. Everything else fades into the background as if it barely exists. It feels completely normal. But what is happening inside your brain is one of the most extraordinary processes you experience every single day. Most people assume they see everything in front of them and simply decide what to focus on afterward. The reality works in the opposite direction. Your brain decides what deserves attention first, and only then does it create the feeling that you consciously noticed it. In other words, your awareness is not receiving the entire world. It is receiving a carefully edited version that your brain believes is worth showing you. Think of your attention like a spotlight on a dark stage. The spotlight can only illuminate a small area at any given moment. Everything outside that beam still exists, but it remains hidden from your conscious awareness. Your brain uses that spotlight because processing every single detail around you would require an impossible amount of energy. Instead, it constantly makes rapid decisions about what should stay inside the light and what should remain in the shadows. One of the clearest examples of this comes from a famous psychological experiment. Participants were asked to count how many times a basketball was passed between players. Most people became so focused on counting that they completely failed to notice someone wearing a gorilla suit walking directly through the middle of the scene. The gorilla was not hidden. It was not transparent. It was in plain sight. Yet many people never saw it because their attention had already been assigned to another task. This phenomenon, known as inattentional blindness, reveals something uncomfortable. Seeing is not the same as noticing. That idea changes the way you understand everyday life. How many opportunities have passed in front of you without being noticed because your attention was occupied somewhere else? How many conversations have you half listened to because your mind was chasing another thought? How many beautiful moments disappeared simply because your brain had decided something else was more important? The world is constantly offering more information than you could ever absorb, so your mind becomes an editor rather than a recorder. Memory plays a huge role in deciding what enters that spotlight. Your brain is always comparing the present moment with everything you have experienced before. If something looks familiar, reminds you of an important event, or connects with a strong emotion, it instantly moves higher on the priority list. That is why you can recognize a friend's face almost instantly in a sea of strangers. Your brain has spent years building a detailed pattern for that face, making it easier to find even in the busiest environments. Emotions make this filtering system even stronger. If you recently had a frightening experience with a barking dog, your eyes may immediately search for dogs whenever you walk through a neighborhood. Someone else who loves dogs may notice playful puppies instead of potential danger. The environment is exactly the same, but each brain highlights different details because each person carries different emotional memories. Your reality is shaped not only by what exists around you, but also by what exists inside your mind. This filtering process also explains why marketers, filmmakers, and social media platforms fight so aggressively for your attention. They understand that your brain is constantly deciding what deserves the spotlight. Bright colors, moving images, emotional expressions, and surprising visuals all compete to convince your brain that they deserve priority. The moment they succeed, they influence not only what you look at, but also what you think about next. Attention is the doorway through which ideas enter your mind. Perhaps the most surprising part is that you can slowly retrain this system. When you repeatedly focus on gratitude, your brain becomes quicker at noticing positive experiences. When you constantly search for problems, it becomes easier to find more problems. This happens because the brain strengthens the pathways it uses most often. Over time, your invisible spotlight begins pointing toward whatever you have taught it to value, whether that is hope, fear, opportunity, or distraction. That means the objects you notice every day are not random. They are clues revealing what your brain currently believes is most important. Every glance tells a story about your priorities, your memories, your emotions, and your habits. Long before you make a conscious decision about what deserves your attention, your brain has already narrowed an endless world into a single moment, quietly choosing one object while allowing 100 others to disappear without you ever realizing they were there. The 200-millisecond decision that controls every glance. You do not realize how often your eyes betray you. You think you are freely scanning the world, choosing where to look, deciding what matters in real time. But there is a hidden moment that happens so fast your conscious mind never gets invited. In less than a blink of awareness, your brain has already made a decision about what you will see next. Not might see, will see. And the most unsettling part is that this decision often finishes before you even feel like you have started looking. Let that land for a second. Before you feel the intention to move your eyes, your brain has already picked the target. This is not poetic exaggeration. It is built into the way your visual system works. Every second, your eyes perform rapid movements called saccades. They jump from point to point instead of smoothly scanning like a camera. Between these jumps, there are tiny moments where your vision is briefly suppressed so you do not notice the motion blur. During those hidden gaps, your brain is not just receiving information, it is actively predicting where to go next. And that prediction happens in roughly 200 milliseconds, sometimes even less. That number matters more than it sounds. 200 milliseconds is shorter than the time it takes to consciously form a thought like "I should look over there." In that space, your brain has already evaluated the scene, filtered the noise, prioritized relevance, and selected a destination for your eyes. By the time you feel like you decided, the decision is already history. Here is what makes it even more intense. Your brain is not choosing randomly. It is running a silent ranking system built from survival instincts, learned habits, emotional memory, and immediate goals. It is constantly asking one question without words. What is most worth seeing right now? Imagine walking into a busy street market. There are hundreds of competing signals, colorful fabrics moving in the wind, people shouting prices, food sizzling, faces passing quickly. Your brain cannot treat all of it equally, or you would freeze. So it compresses everything into a priority map. Bright movement gets flagged. Human faces get flagged. Sudden changes get flagged. Anything connected to your goals gets flagged. Everything else gets downgraded before you are even aware it exists. That is why your eyes land on a friend in a crowd before you consciously search for them. That is why you notice your name being spoken in a noisy room, even when you were not paying attention. That is why a notification light can pull your gaze away from deep focus like a magnet. Your brain is not reacting after perception. It is shaping perception itself. The shocking part is how much of this system runs on prediction rather than reality. Your brain is not waiting to fully understand the world before deciding where to look. It is guessing. It uses past experience like a shortcut. If something similar was important before, it assumes it might be important again. If something once triggered fear, attraction, or reward, it gets higher priority in future scenes. You are not just seeing what is there. You are seeing what your brain expects to matter. And this is where emotion quietly takes control. If you are anxious, your brain becomes hypersensitive to potential threats. It starts prioritizing shadows, sudden movements, and ambiguous expressions. If you are excited or in love, it prioritizes faces, connection points, and reward signals. The environment does not change, but your internal state rewrites the ranking system in real time. The same room can feel safe or uncomfortable, depending entirely on what your brain is filtering for. Even more interesting is how this 200 millisecond system can be influenced without your awareness. Designers of apps, advertisements, and interfaces understand that they are not competing for your conscious decision. They are competing for your pre-conscious selection window. A flash of color, a slight motion, a face looking directly at you from a screen. These are not random design choices. They are carefully engineered triggers that aim to win that tiny slice of processing time before your awareness catches up. If something wins that window, it wins your gaze. If it wins your gaze, it often wins your attention. And if it wins your attention, it can quietly shape your thoughts without you realizing how you got there. Now here is where things become uncomfortable but important. Most people believe they control what they focus on. But in reality, control is shared between you and a system that operates faster than you can consciously interrupt. You can direct your attention intentionally, but only after your brain has already begun preparing a default path. That means a large part of your experience of choice is actually your awareness catching up to a decision already made in the background. Still, this system is not something you are trapped inside. It is something you can influence once you understand it exists. The more you become aware of how quickly your attention is being guided, the more space you create between impulse and response. And in that space, something interesting happens. You begin to notice that even your simplest glances are not as random as they once seemed. They are structured. They are patterned. They are shaped by a hidden timing mechanism that has been running your visual world since the moment you first opened your eyes. And once you see that pattern clearly, it becomes harder to unsee it. Every glance starts to feel less like a coincidence and more like a quiet decision made before you ever had the chance to think at all. How motion hijacks your attention instantly. Something happens to your attention the moment anything moves in your environment, and you almost never question it. You could be completely focused, deep in thought, maybe even reading or talking, and then a tiny shift at the edge of your vision instantly pulls you away. Not slowly, not gently. Instantly. It feels like your eyes made a choice, but what actually happened is far more automatic. Motion interrupts your mind before you even get a chance to resist it, and most of the time, you do not even notice the interruption itself, only the fact that your focus is gone. This reaction is so fast that it bypasses what you think of as conscious control. You do not sit there and evaluate whether the movement matters. Your brain decides that for you before awareness even forms a sentence. A flicker on a screen, a hand gesture, a passing car, a notification animation. All of these things trigger a response that feels personal, but is actually ancient. Your visual system is built to treat motion as a potential event, something that might require action, even danger. If you think about your daily life, you will start noticing how often motion steals you without permission. You pick up your phone for one simple task, and suddenly a moving video on the screen captures your attention before you even read what you came for. You are walking through a quiet space, fully absorbed in thought, and then someone walks past you, and your eyes follow them without effort. You are not trying to look. You are pulled into looking. That difference is everything. The reason this happens is deeply tied to how your brain evolved. Long before cities, screens, and constant visual noise, motion was one of the most reliable indicators that something important was happening in your environment. Still water meant safety. Still grass meant nothing unusual. But sudden movement could mean a predator, prey, or opportunity. So your brain developed specialized systems that prioritize motion over almost everything else in your visual field. It does not ask permission because in survival terms, hesitation costs too much time. Inside your brain, there are neurons specifically tuned to detect changes in movement and direction. When something shifts, these neurons activate faster than those responsible for detailed recognition. That means your brain often notices that something moved before it even knows what it is. First comes the alert, then comes the understanding. So when something moves, your attention gets hijacked at the alert stage itself, long before logic or intention can intervene. This is also why static images struggle to compete with anything dynamic. You can scroll past 100 still posts without feeling much, but the moment something moves even slightly, your attention locks in. It does not matter if the motion is meaningful or not. A looping animation, a blinking icon, or a subtle zoom effect can all override your focus. Your brain is not evaluating importance in a logical way. It is responding to signals that once mattered for survival. You can see this clearly in everyday environments designed to capture attention. In a crowded street, billboards with subtle motion elements will pull your gaze more effectively than static ones. On your phone, apps use micro animations, bouncing indicators, and smooth transitions not just for aesthetics, but because your brain cannot ignore movement easily. Even a small red dot that pulses slightly becomes harder to ignore than a larger static element nearby. Motion does not need to be loud to be powerful. It just needs to exist. What makes this even more interesting is that your attention does not just shift toward motion, it follows it. If something moves across your field of vision, your eyes instinctively track it. This is called smooth pursuit, and it happens without conscious effort. You are not deciding to follow the movement. Your visual system is doing it automatically to keep the object stable in your perception. That means motion does not just grab your attention once, it can drag it along with it for as long as it continues. This creates a subtle but powerful effect in modern life. Whoever controls motion often controls attention, and whoever controls attention influences thought. It is not about forcing you to look. It is about making it impossible not to. A moving object becomes the center of your awareness even if everything else around it is more important. That is why so much of your environment feels harder to ignore than you realize. The most unsettling part is how normal it feels. You rarely notice when motion pulls you away from your original thought. You just find yourself somewhere else mentally, watching, reacting, or scrolling, without remembering the exact moment your attention changed direction. It feels like a smooth transition, but in reality it is a series of automatic triggers, constantly redirecting your focus. Once you understand this, something subtle changes in how you experience the world. You start noticing how often your eyes are not following your intention, but following movement instead. And in those moments, it becomes clear that your attention is not just observing motion. In many cases, it is being led by it without ever asking where it is going. Why bright colors win the battle for your eyes? You might think your eyes are calm observers of the world, simply taking things in as they are. But the truth is, your attention is constantly being pulled into small battles, and color is one of the strongest weapons in that fight. Before you even realize you are looking at something, brightness and saturation have already started influencing where your gaze goes. It feels like a simple preference, like you are choosing what stands out. But your brain is reacting far faster than your thoughts can catch up. Think about walking down a street filled with neutral buildings, muted tones, and repetitive patterns. Most of it blends together. Then suddenly, a single object painted in a vivid color appears. Maybe it is a red sign, a bright yellow shirt, or a neon green advertisement. Your eyes shift toward it almost instantly, not because you decided to look, but because your visual system flagged it as important before you had any say in the matter. That shift happens so fast that your awareness simply follows after the fact and creates the illusion of choice. To understand why this happens, you need to realize that your brain is not interested in treating everything equally. Equality would be overwhelming. Instead, it constantly ranks visual information based on what might matter most. Brightness and strong color contrast sit at the very top of that ranking system. They act like alarms in your visual field, signaling that something is different from the background. And in nature, difference often meant significance. A bright object could be ripe fruit, fire, danger, or something worth immediate attention. Your brain still operates with that ancient assumption. What makes color so powerful is not just how it looks, but how it breaks prediction. Your brain is constantly trying to predict what the next moment will look like based on what it just saw. When something matches expectations, it is quietly ignored. But when something violates that expectation with sudden brightness or intense contrast, the prediction fails. That failure is not neutral. It triggers attention. Your system immediately says something changed, and change demands focus. This is why dull environments feel mentally invisible, while colorful elements feel unavoidable. If everything around you is similar in tone, your attention drifts easily. But the moment a strong color enters the scene, it interrupts that flow. It is not asking for permission. It is forcing a recalibration of your visual priorities. Even if you try to ignore it, your brain still processes it first before deciding whether to dismiss it later. That initial processing is enough to pull your awareness in its direction. There is also a biological layer to this effect. Your eyes are more sensitive to certain wavelengths of light, especially those that stand out sharply from natural surroundings. In environments where greens, browns, and soft blues are common, any intense red, orange, or neon shade immediately stands apart. That separation creates contrast, and contrast is one of the fastest ways to capture neural attention. Your visual system is built to detect edges and differences, not uniformity. Now think about how this plays out in modern environments. Screens are not neutral spaces. They are carefully designed fields of attention competition. A notification badge in bright red does not need to be large or animated to be effective. Its power comes from contrast alone. Against a muted interface, it becomes impossible to fully ignore. Even if you are not consciously thinking about it, part of your attention keeps returning to it. That is because your brain treats it as unresolved information. The same principle applies in advertising, branding, and even social media feeds. Bright colors are not used randomly. They are selected because they override visual noise. When everything is competing for attention, the elements that stand out in color automatically rise above the rest. Your eyes are not choosing based on meaning first. They are choosing based on visibility. Meaning comes later, after the attention has already been captured. What is even more interesting is how quickly your brain adapts to color environments. If you are surrounded by highly saturated visuals for too long, your system begins to normalize them. But then something slightly more intense appears, and your attention spikes again. This creates a cycle where your threshold for noticing increases, and so does the intensity required to grab you again. It is a constant recalibration of what stands out. But even in that adaptation, color never loses its advantage. It remains one of the fastest ways to interrupt thought and redirect focus. You might be deeply engaged in something important, yet a sudden flash of brightness on the edge of your vision can break that engagement in less than a second. You do not experience it as a breakdown of focus. You experience it as natural curiosity, but underneath, it is your attention system responding to contrast before your intention can stabilize. The most subtle part of this entire process is that you rarely notice the transition itself. You only notice what you end up looking at. The moment your attention shifts from one point to another is almost invisible. Bright color acts like a silent hand, guiding your gaze across the environment, deciding what enters your awareness and what gets filtered out. Once you start paying attention to this pattern, you begin to see how often your eyes are not moving randomly at all. They are being guided by contrast, pulled by saturation, and redirected by visual intensity. And in that realization, something shifts. The world does not change, but the way your attention moves through it starts to feel less like freedom and more like a system quietly deciding what you are allowed to notice next. The evolutionary survival system still directing your vision. You are not seeing the world with modern eyes. You are seeing it through an ancient survival system that was built long before cities, screens, or even language existed. And the strange part is, it is still running today, quietly deciding what you notice and what disappears from your awareness. Every glance you take is filtered through instincts designed for survival in environments where missing one detail could mean life or death. Think about how quickly your attention reacts to certain things. A sudden movement in the corner of your vision, a face that looks directly at you, a shadow that does not match the environment. You do not analyze these moments first. You react. Something inside you pulls your attention before you even understand why. It feels natural, almost automatic, but it is actually your brain running an ancient program that has not been updated for the modern world. The shocking truth is that your vision is not built for accuracy. It is built for survival efficiency. That means your brain is not trying to show you everything. It is trying to show you what could matter for staying alive. For most of human history, that meant detecting predators, finding food, tracking social threats, and noticing changes in the environment. Everything else was irrelevant noise. So your visual system evolved to ignore most of reality by default. This is why your attention is so easily captured by anything that resembles a threat or opportunity. A fast movement in your peripheral vision can trigger the same alert system that once helped your ancestors survive ambushes. Even today, your brain treats sudden changes as potential danger until proven otherwise. That reaction happens in milliseconds, faster than conscious thought. It is not asking if you are safe. It assumes you might not be. Now here is where it gets interesting. Your brain does not just react to danger. It also prioritizes social information. Human faces are one of the strongest attention magnets in your visual system. You can be surrounded by objects, patterns, and text, but the moment a face appears, your attention shifts almost instantly. This is because survival was never just about avoiding predators. It was also about reading allies, enemies, and emotional states within a group. Missing a social cue could be just as dangerous as missing a physical threat. Even eye contact carries a deeper weight in your attention system. When something appears to look back at you, your brain treats it as highly significant. That is why faces in advertisements or videos feel so engaging, even when you are not trying to focus on them. Your survival system does not distinguish between a real person and a representation of one at the first stage of processing. It reacts first, evaluates later. Another layer of this system is pattern detection. Your brain is constantly scanning for shapes that match stored survival templates. Is that movement similar to a predator? Is that sound pattern unusual? Is that shape something I have seen before in a meaningful context? This happens automatically, without permission. Your vision is not passive. It is predictive. It is always asking what this could mean based on past experience. This is why illusions and misinterpretations are so common. Your brain prefers fast interpretation over perfect accuracy. If something even slightly resembles a known threat, it gets flagged early. It is better to be wrong sometimes than to miss something important once. That bias toward speed over precision is still active in you right now, shaping every glance you take. In modern life, this system creates strange mismatches. You are no longer in constant physical danger, but your attention system still behaves as if you are. That is why alarms, notifications, and sudden visual changes feel so urgent. They plug directly into the same survival pathways that once helped humans stay alive in unpredictable environments. Your phone does not need to force your attention. It only needs to imitate signals your brain already considers important. Even curiosity itself has survival roots. When something is slightly unfamiliar, but not immediately threatening, your brain pushes you to look closer. This behavior once helped humans explore resources, discover food sources, and map their surroundings. Today, it is what keeps you watching moving visuals, scrolling feeds, and checking things that feel unresolved. Your attention is constantly being pulled between caution and curiosity. What makes all of this more powerful is that you rarely feel the mechanism working. You only experience the result. You notice where your eyes landed, not why they moved there. You think you are choosing what to see, but most of the time you are witnessing the output of a survival system, making rapid decisions in the background. And yet, this system is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what it was designed to do. The problem is not the system itself, but the environment it now operates in. It was built for forests, tribes, and physical survival. Now, it is being used in a world filled with artificial signals competing for the same ancient attention pathways. Once you understand this, something subtle shifts in how you experience your own vision. You start noticing that your eyes are not just observing reality. They are following instructions written by evolution itself, still active inside you, still shaping every moment of what you see, and still deciding long before you ever get the chance to think. Why faces always pull your attention first? You can be surrounded by hundreds of details, colors, objects, and movements. But the moment a face appears in that scene, something in you shifts instantly. Your attention locks on without permission, almost like it was waiting for that exact signal. It does not matter if you are tired, distracted, or focused on something else. A face cuts through everything else and becomes the center of your awareness before you even realize it happened. What is strange is that you do not experience this as a reaction. You experience it as normal seeing. But underneath that normal feeling is one of the strongest attention systems in your entire brain, one that has been refined over millions of years of evolution. Your visual system is not just built to detect objects. It is built to detect people. And among all visual patterns, faces are the most important category your brain has ever learned. The reason starts with survival. For early humans, recognizing another face instantly could mean the difference between safety and danger, trust and threat, cooperation and conflict. You did not have time to slowly analyze whether someone nearby was a friend or a rival. You needed immediate identification. So your brain developed specialized circuits that prioritize facial patterns over almost everything else in the environment. That priority system is still running in you right now, unchanged in its urgency. There is a part of your brain called the fusiform face area, and it becomes highly active whenever you see a face. What is important is not just that it responds, but how fast it responds. Facial recognition begins extremely early in the visual process, before you consciously register what you are looking at. This means your brain is already categorizing something as a face before your awareness even forms a thought about it. By the time you realize you are looking at someone, your brain has already decided that it matters. This early detection creates a powerful attention pull. Your visual system treats faces as high-priority inputs, which means they are processed first even in crowded environments. In a room full of objects, your brain will still filter toward faces because they carry social information. A face tells you identity, emotion, intention, and attention direction all at once. No other visual element contains that much meaning in such a compact form. Even more interesting is how sensitive your system is to eye direction. If a face is looking toward you, your attention becomes even stronger. There is a deep biological reason for this. Eye contact once meant direct social interaction, which could signal alliance, confrontation, or communication. Missing that signal could have serious consequences. So your brain treats gaze direction as urgent information. When something looks at you, it feels like it is calling your attention personally, even if it is just an image on a screen. This is why faces in media are so powerful. A profile picture, a thumbnail, or a passing face in a video does not need motion or sound to capture you. The structure alone is enough. Your brain is wired to detect facial symmetry, eye placement, and expression patterns faster than almost any other visual feature. Even partial faces or blurred ones can still trigger attention because your system completes the pattern automatically. What makes this even more compelling is how emotional expression amplifies the effect. A neutral face already captures attention, but a smiling face, an angry face, or a fearful face increases engagement dramatically. This is because emotions on faces once provided critical survival data. Knowing whether someone was safe, hostile, or distressed allowed early humans to make rapid decisions in social environments. Today, that same sensitivity makes you react instantly to emotional content without conscious analysis. You might notice this in your own behavior when scrolling through images or videos. Even if you are ignoring everything else, your eyes keep returning to faces. It is not because you are choosing to care. It is because your brain assigns priority to social information before you even have a chance to filter it. Everything else in the environment is competing for attention. Faces are starting ahead of the competition. Another subtle layer is how faces create a sense of presence. Unlike objects, a face implies a mind behind it. When you see a face, your brain automatically begins constructing a mental model of another person. What they might be thinking, what they might be feeling, whether they are aware of you. This simulation process is immediate and automatic, and it consumes attention even if you are not consciously engaging with it. That is why faces feel alive in a way that objects never do. This also explains why human communication is so visually dependent. Even in conversations, you constantly monitor micro-expressions, eye movements, and subtle changes in facial posture. Your brain is extracting layers of meaning from these signals without asking for permission. You are not just hearing words. You are reading a face. The most interesting part is that this system cannot be turned off. You can train yourself to ignore distractions, but you cannot stop your brain from recognizing faces as important. It is deeply embedded in your perceptual hardware. That means every environment you enter, every screen you look at, and every visual field you experience is quietly being reorganized around one central priority. People first, everything else second. And once you understand that, you start noticing something you never paid attention to before. Your eyes are not simply scanning reality. They are constantly searching for presence, for identity, for human signals hidden inside the noise. Faces are not just part of what you see. They are what your vision was built to find before anything else ever mattered. The hidden power of eye contact in controlling attention. There is a moment that happens so fast you almost never catch it. You are looking at something completely unrelated. Maybe a screen, maybe a room, maybe just lost in thought, and then suddenly you feel it. A sense that something is pulling your focus. Before you even understand what changed, your attention has already shifted. Most of the time, what triggered that shift is not sound, not motion, not color. It is another pair of eyes. Eye contact is one of the most powerful attention triggers in human perception, and you do not experience it as a trigger. You experience it as awareness. It feels natural, like you simply noticed someone. But underneath that feeling is a deeply wired system that treats eyes as priority signals. Long before you learned language or logic, your brain learned that eyes contain intention. If something is looking at you, it matters. That assumption still runs your attention today. What makes eye contact so powerful is not just that you see a face. It is that you feel seen. The moment your brain detects that another gaze might be directed toward you, it changes the entire priority of your visual system. Suddenly, everything else becomes less important. Your attention reorganizes itself around that possibility. This happens before you can analyze it, before you can question it, and before you can decide otherwise. This reaction comes from an ancient survival need. In early human environments, being looked at often meant being noticed by another mind. That could signal connection, competition, threat, or communication. Ignoring that signal was not an option. So your brain developed a fast tracking system for eyes. It does not wait for confirmation. It reacts to the pattern of gaze first and explains it later. Even more interesting is how little it takes to activate this system. You do not need a real person staring directly at you. A photograph, a drawing, or even a video frame can trigger the same response. As long as the structure of eyes is present and oriented in a way that suggests attention, your brain begins to simulate the feeling of being observed. That simulation is enough to redirect your focus. Once eye contact is detected, your attention does something unusual. It stops treating the environment as neutral space and starts treating it as social space. This shift is important. Objects become less relevant. People become central. Your brain assumes that anything involving another mind carries more importance than anything that does not. That is why a face in a crowd immediately overrides everything else you were processing. It is not just another visual element. It is a potential interaction. There is also a subtle layer happening inside your brain that makes eye contact feel so personal. When you detect someone looking at you, your mind automatically builds a model of their intention. You start asking questions without words. Are they aware of me? Are they judging me? Do they recognize me? Should I respond? This internal simulation happens instantly and consumes attention, even if you choose not to engage with it consciously. That is why eye contact can feel intense even in silent or distant situations. What most people do not realize is that your attention is not just pulled by seeing eyes. It is pulled by the direction of eyes. If someone is looking at something else, your brain often follows their gaze automatically. This is called gaze following, and it is one of the earliest social learning tools humans develop. It allows you to understand what others find important without needing explanation. In a way, your attention is constantly being guided by the attention of others. This is why, in group settings, your focus can shift without any clear reason. You see people suddenly looking in one direction, and your attention follows before you even know why. Your brain assumes that if multiple people are attending to something, it might be important. That assumption happens faster than conscious reasoning. You are not deciding to join their attention. You are inheriting it. Modern environments quietly exploit this system. Cameras, thumbnails, advertisements, and social media content often use direct gaze because it creates immediate engagement. A face looking directly at you breaks the usual pattern of passive observation. It creates the feeling that the content is not just being seen, but is also seeing you. That illusion is powerful enough to hold attention longer than almost any other visual strategy. Even subtle changes in eye direction can alter your perception of importance. A face looking slightly away feels different from one looking straight at you. One creates curiosity, the other creates connection. Your brain reads both instantly and adjusts attention accordingly without asking for permission. This happens so fast that you rarely notice the transition itself. You only notice that your focus has moved. The most surprising part of all this is that eye contact does not just control where you look, it influences how you think while you are looking. When your attention is anchored to a perceived gaze, your mind becomes more aware of social meaning. You become more conscious of yourself, more aware of evaluation, and more sensitive to context. In other words, eye contact does not only capture attention, it reshapes the state of attention itself. Once you recognize this pattern, something changes in how you experience everyday moments. You start noticing how often your attention is redirected by invisible social cues. A glance from a stranger, a face in a video, a pair of eyes in a crowd, each one quietly competing for a fraction of your awareness. And slowly it becomes clear that your attention is not just responding to the world. It is constantly negotiating with other minds, even when no words are spoken. How curiosity creates invisible magnets for your eyes. There is a strange moment you experience dozens of times a day without noticing it. Your eyes are resting on one thing, your mind is settled, and everything feels stable. Then something slightly off appears. Not loud, not bright, not even clearly important. But suddenly your attention shifts, almost like something invisible reached out and pulled it. You did not decide to look. You just ended up looking. That pull is curiosity, and it behaves like a hidden magnet operating inside your perception. Curiosity is not just a feeling. It is a control system for attention. It activates whenever your brain detects a gap between what you know and what you want to know. That gap creates tension, and your visual system responds to that tension by redirecting your gaze toward whatever might resolve it. In other words, your eyes are not just seeing what is present. They are constantly searching for what is missing. Think about how easily this happens in everyday life. You are scrolling through content, and everything feels predictable. Then a thumbnail shows something slightly incomplete, a partially hidden object, a face with an unclear expression, a sentence that stops mid-idea. Even without thinking, your attention locks in. That is not randomness. That is your brain reacting to uncertainty. The reason curiosity is so powerful is because your brain treats uncertainty as unfinished business. When something does not fully make sense, it creates a small loop in your mind that wants closure. Your attention is the tool that closes that loop. So instead of passively observing the world, your visual system actively hunts for completion. Anything that promises resolution becomes a priority target. This is where curiosity becomes an invisible magnet. It does not pull you toward everything. It pulls you toward incompleteness. A perfectly clear image can be ignored, but a slightly unclear one becomes impossible to ignore. Your brain assumes that missing information might be important, so it increases attention until the gap is resolved. You feel like you are choosing to look closer, but what is actually happening is your brain trying to reduce uncertainty. There is also a deeper survival reason behind this mechanism. In natural environments, missing information could mean danger or opportunity. Not knowing what is behind a sound in the bushes could be costly. So over time, humans evolved a system that prioritizes unknowns. If something is not fully understood, it gets attention first. That bias still runs your perception today, even in completely safe environments. Curiosity also interacts with prediction. Your brain is constantly building models of what it expects to see next. When reality breaks that prediction, even slightly, attention is triggered. That is why unexpected patterns feel so visually sticky. A design that looks almost normal, but not quite right, can hold your gaze longer than something perfectly clear. The brain is trying to reconcile the difference between expectation and reality. What makes this even more interesting is that curiosity does not require obvious mystery. It can be triggered by subtle inconsistencies. A shadow that does not match its object. A sound that does not fit the environment. A face with an unreadable expression. These small gaps are enough to activate the attention system. Your eyes move toward them before you consciously realize why. Modern environments are built around this exact mechanism. Social media feeds, advertisements, and even video editing rely heavily on controlled curiosity gaps. A paused moment before a reveal. A cropped image that hides context. A caption that implies something but does not fully explain it. These are not accidental design choices. They are engineered triggers for your attention system. Once curiosity is activated, your attention behaves differently. It becomes sticky. It resists distraction. It keeps returning to the unresolved point until closure is achieved. That is why you might find yourself unable to ignore something even when you try. It is not willpower being weak. It is your brain prioritizing resolution over everything else. There is also a feedback loop that strengthens this effect. The more often curiosity is rewarded with satisfying information, the more sensitive your brain becomes to future gaps. This means your attention system learns what types of uncertainty matter. Over time, it becomes faster at detecting even small inconsistencies and reacting to them. Your eyes begin to move toward curiosity triggers almost automatically. But curiosity is not only about external stimuli. It also shapes internal attention. When you think about something unresolved, your gaze often drifts without purpose. Your eyes move, but they are not really looking at the environment. They are following an internal search process. Your brain is trying to visualize missing information, and your vision becomes part of that search. This is why curiosity can feel slightly restless. It creates motion in your attention even when nothing in the environment is changing. Your mind is pulling your eyes toward imagined answers. The external world becomes a backdrop for an internal question that has not been resolved yet. The most subtle part of this entire system is that curiosity feels like freedom. It feels like you are choosing to explore. But in reality, your attention is being guided by gaps in understanding that your brain is constantly trying to close. Every glance driven by curiosity is part of a deeper process of reducing uncertainty and completing patterns. Once you start noticing this, the world begins to feel different. You see how often your eyes are not drawn to what is complete, but to what is incomplete. And in that realization, it becomes clear that curiosity is not just an emotion you experience. It is one of the strongest invisible forces directing where your attention goes long before you ever think about it. Why your eyes predict the future before you notice it. You think your eyes are simply recording the world as it happens, like a live camera feed. But what is actually happening is far more strange. Your vision is always slightly ahead of your awareness. In a way, your eyes are not just seeing the present. They are constantly guessing what is about to happen next, and your brain accepts those guesses as reality before you even realize there was a prediction being made. This prediction system is running all the time, silently shaping what you think you are seeing. When something moves across your field of view, your brain does not wait for each frame to arrive and then react. It begins forecasting where that object will be in the next moment. It fills in the gap between now and the immediate future so smoothly that you never notice the missing pieces. What you experience as real time is actually a carefully constructed prediction stitched together by your visual system. The reason this happens is simple but powerful. Your brain evolved in a world where reacting too slowly meant missing opportunities or threats. If an animal is running toward you, waiting for full visual confirmation of each position would be too late, so your brain developed a shortcut. It predicts motion instead of just observing it. That prediction allows you to respond faster than reality itself unfolds. Inside your visual system, this prediction starts before you are conscious of it. Your eyes gather fragments of information, but your brain immediately tries to complete the pattern. It estimates direction, speed, and likely outcome. If someone is walking across a room, you are not seeing only where they are right now. You are already perceiving where they are about to be. That means your experience of the present is partly built from the future your brain expects. This becomes especially noticeable when something suddenly changes direction. You might feel a tiny delay in understanding, almost like your perception needs to catch up. That is because your brain had already committed to a prediction and reality briefly broke it. In that moment, you experience a correction process where the visual system updates its forecast. What feels like confusion is actually your brain recalibrating its version of the present. Even your ability to track moving objects depends on this prediction system. Your eyes do not chase motion perfectly in real time. Instead, they anticipate where the object will be and jump slightly ahead. This is why smooth tracking is possible at all. Without prediction, moving objects would appear blurry or unstable. Your brain prevents that by continuously estimating future positions and adjusting your gaze accordingly. This predictive behavior is not limited to motion. It extends to patterns, environments, and even social situations. When you enter a familiar space, your brain already expects what you will see next. Doors, furniture, people, and sounds are all partially preloaded in your perception. That is why familiar environments feel effortless to navigate. Your brain is not discovering them in real time. It is confirming what it already predicted. The same mechanism explains why surprises feel so powerful. When reality deviates from expectation, your prediction system fails momentarily. That failure forces immediate attention. Your eyes lock onto the change because your brain needs to resolve the mismatch. In that moment, attention is not optional. It is mandatory. Your visual system must correct its model of what is happening. What makes this even more interesting is that prediction is not always accurate, but it does not need to be. It only needs to be close enough to keep you functional. Your brain prefers speed over precision. It would rather guess correctly most of the time than wait for perfect information. That trade-off allows you to move through the world smoothly, even though your perception is constantly slightly ahead of reality. There is also a subtle illusion created by this system. Because your brain fills in gaps so efficiently, you never experience the raw data of vision. You only experience the finished prediction. That means you are never directly seeing the world. You are seeing the brain's best guess of the world, and that guess is updated so quickly that it feels like continuous truth. This predictive layer also influences attention. Your eyes are more likely to lock onto things that break expectation or confirm strong predictions. If something aligns too perfectly with what you already expect, it fades into the background. If something slightly violates expectation, it becomes more visible. Your attention is not just reacting to reality, it is reacting to differences between prediction and outcome. In everyday life, this creates a constant dance between expectation and surprise. Your brain is always trying to stay one step ahead of what you are about to see, and most of the time, it succeeds so well that you forget it is happening at all. You believe you are simply observing the world as it unfolds, when in reality your perception is always arriving just a moment early, shaped by predictions you never consciously made. Once you understand this, something shifts in how you interpret your own experience. You begin to realize that even the present moment is partly constructed from the future. Your eyes are not passive receivers of reality. They are active predictors, constantly shaping what you see before you are even aware that seeing has begun. The secret role of memory in deciding what you see. You like to think your eyes are honest, that they simply open, take in the world, and pass everything straight into your awareness like a clean recording. But what you actually experience is far less direct. Every time you look at something, your memory is already standing behind your vision, quietly editing what gets through and what gets ignored. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as your past has trained you to recognize it. The strange part is that this happens before you even realize you are looking. The moment light hits your eyes, your brain is already comparing patterns to stored experiences. It is asking a silent question. Have I seen this before? And if so, what did it mean? That comparison happens so fast that by the time you become aware of the object, it already feels familiar or irrelevant or important, depending on what your memory has decided. This is why two people can look at the exact same scene and notice completely different things. One person sees a crowded street and immediately focuses on faces, while another notices exits, movement patterns, or potential threats. The scene is identical, but the memory history inside each brain is different. And that history determines what gets prioritized in vision. Your eyes are not just scanning reality, they are scanning it through layers of remembered experience. Memory works like a filter that assigns weight to everything you see. If something matches a strong past emotion, it gets amplified. If something is linked to danger, it becomes more visible. If something has no memory value at all, your brain often discards it before you consciously register it. That is why you can walk through the same place every day and still fail to notice details that were always there. They never earned a place in your memory system, so your attention never elevated them. This filtering process is incredibly fast. It happens in parallel with perception, not after it. Your brain is not waiting for you to understand what you are seeing. It is actively shaping what you are allowed to notice based on stored knowledge. In a way, memory is acting like a background editor, selecting which parts of reality deserve to become conscious experience. Even recognition itself is not as simple as it feels. When you recognize a face, a place, or an object, you are not discovering it in real time. You are matching it against a stored template in memory. The closer the match, the faster it enters your awareness. This is why familiar things feel instantly noticeable. Your brain has already built a shortcut for them. They require almost no processing to bring into focus. But memory does more than just help you recognize things. It also predicts what should appear next. If you have walked through a room many times, your brain builds expectations about what belongs in that space. When something changes, even slightly, it stands out immediately. A missing object, a moved chair, a new sound. These differences are not inherently loud. They are loud because they break memory-based expectations. This is also why emotional memories are so powerful in shaping attention. If you once had a strong emotional experience in a certain situation, your brain becomes more sensitive to similar patterns in the future. A neutral face might suddenly feel threatening. A normal sound might feel comforting. The memory does not just recall the past. It actively rewires what you pay attention to in the present. What makes this even more subtle is that memory does not always feel like memory. Most of the time, it feels like intuition. You just know where to look, what to avoid, or what seems important. But underneath that feeling is a network of past experiences quietly guiding your visual priorities. Your attention is often just memory acting in real time. This influence becomes even stronger in familiar environments. When you enter a place you know well, your brain stops processing everything equally and instead focuses only on changes. It assumes the rest is already known. That is why you can miss obvious details in familiar settings, but immediately notice small differences. Your memory is telling your vision what matters and what can be ignored. There is also a feedback loop at work. Whatever you pay attention to becomes more strongly stored in memory, and whatever is strongly stored in memory becomes more likely to capture future attention. Over time, this loop shapes not just what you see, but how you see in general. Your perception slowly becomes a reflection of what your brain has repeatedly decided is important. Even curiosity and attention are influenced by memory patterns. Things that partially match something you have seen before, but are not fully familiar, tend to draw your gaze the most. Your brain treats them as potentially meaningful. Not too new, not too old, but uncertain enough to investigate. That balance between familiarity and novelty is where attention becomes most active. The most interesting part of all this is that memory is not sitting behind your vision as a passive archive. It is actively participating in every frame you experience. It decides what gets highlighted, what gets ignored, and what feels worth noticing. You are not simply looking at the world and remembering it later. You are remembering while you look, and that remembering is shaping what the world appears to be. Once you notice this, your experience of seeing changes slightly. You begin to realize that your attention is not only responding to reality, it is responding to everything you have ever seen before, reorganizing the present moment through the lens of the past, and quietly deciding what your eyes are allowed to notice next. How fear quietly redirects your gaze. Fear does not always feel like fear. Most of the time, it feels like awareness, like caution, like simply being careful about your surroundings. But underneath that feeling is a silent system that can completely reorganize where your eyes go in a fraction of a second. You think you are choosing what to look at. In reality, fear is often choosing for you before you even realize anything has changed. The strange thing about fear is that it does not need a clear threat to activate. It only needs a possibility, a shadow that looks slightly out of place, a sudden sound that does not fit the pattern, a face that feels unfamiliar in a crowded space. The moment your brain interprets something as potentially unsafe, your visual system shifts priorities instantly. What you were focusing on becomes less important. What might be dangerous becomes everything. This shift happens so fast that you rarely notice the transition itself. One moment your attention is stable. The next moment your eyes are scanning. Not calmly but searching. That difference is important. Fear does not just move your gaze. It changes the style of your gaze. It turns observation into investigation. Inside your brain, there is a fast pathway that responds to potential threat before conscious thought is involved. It bypasses slower reasoning systems because in survival terms, hesitation is costly. That system pushes your attention toward anything that could matter for safety. Movement in the periphery becomes more noticeable. Unclear shapes become more suspicious. Even silence can feel loaded with meaning when fear is active. What makes this even more powerful is that fear does not just highlight danger. It suppresses everything else. Your attention narrows. The world literally feels smaller. Details that were once visible fade into the background. Your brain is not trying to show you more. It is trying to reduce complexity so you can respond quickly. That reduction feels like focus, but it is actually a form of filtering. Think about walking alone at night in an unfamiliar place. Under normal conditions, you might notice architecture, signs, distant lights, or subtle details in the environment. But when fear enters, all of that disappears. Your gaze becomes directional. You are not exploring anymore. You are scanning for exits, for movement, for anything that breaks the expected pattern. Your visual system is no longer curious. It is defensive. This defensive mode is incredibly efficient, which is why it evolved and stayed. In environments where survival mattered, noticing one real threat quickly was more important than noticing 10 harmless details. So fear tuned attention toward speed and certainty over richness of perception. That is why when fear is active, your memory of the moment often feels fragmented. You were not fully processing the environment. You were processing survival relevance. There is also a subtle distortion effect that fear creates in perception. Objects that are neutral can begin to feel significant simply because they are not fully understood. A person standing still might feel more suspicious than someone moving. A sound you cannot identify becomes more important than one you can. Your brain prefers clear categories, and when it cannot find them, it leans toward caution. This is where fear quietly begins to redirect your gaze without you noticing. It is not just reacting to threats. It is actively reshaping what counts as important. Your attention is pulled toward uncertainty itself. Anything ambiguous becomes a potential focus point. That is why fear often feels like hyper-awareness, even though it is actually narrowing your field of attention. Modern environments make this system even more complex. You are rarely in true physical danger, but your brain still runs the same patterns. News headlines, sudden alerts, loud notifications, and unexpected visuals can all trigger the same attention shift. Your gaze moves not because something is dangerous, but because it resembles the structure of danger your brain learned long ago. Even subtle emotional fear, like social anxiety or uncertainty in a conversation, can redirect your attention outward. You begin scanning faces for reactions. You notice micro-expressions you would normally ignore. You track tone shifts and pauses in speech. Your eyes become tuned to social safety instead of physical safety. The target of fear changes, but the mechanism stays the same. What is most important to understand is that fear does not always feel intense. It can operate at a very low level, just enough to bias attention without fully entering awareness. In that state, you might believe you are calmly observing a situation, when in fact your gaze is being gently guided by background concern. You are looking, but you are looking through a filter that prioritizes risk. And that filter can be persistent. Once your brain learns to associate certain environments or situations with uncertainty, your attention system becomes quicker to activate fear-based scanning in those contexts. Over time, this creates a pattern where your gaze repeatedly returns to potential threats, even when none are present. The system is not broken. It is simply overprotective. The most subtle part of all this is that fear often disguises itself as logic. It tells you that you are just being observant, just being careful, just checking. But beneath those explanations is a deeper mechanism deciding what deserves your eyes in the first place. And most of the time, that decision is made before you even realize you had a choice. Once you become aware of this, something shifts in how you experience attention. You start noticing how often your gaze is not neutral at all. It is being pulled, tightened, and redirected by a quiet system designed to keep you safe, even when safety is not actually at risk. And in that realization, you begin to see that fear is not just an emotion you feel. It is a force that shapes where you look long before you ever think about it. Why your goals change what becomes visible. There is a strange shift that happens the moment you decide you want something. The world does not change, but suddenly it feels different. Things you never noticed before start appearing everywhere. Opportunities feel closer. Relevant details feel louder. And at the same time, a lot of what used to stand out quietly disappears into the background. It feels like the environment itself has updated. But what actually changed is not the world. It is your attention system being rewritten by your goals. Your brain does not treat vision as a passive recording. It treats it as a search engine. And your goals are the search query. The moment you set an intention, even something simple like I want to find a good coffee shop or I want to improve my fitness, your brain begins reorganizing what counts as relevant information. It does this before you even start consciously looking. The goal becomes a filter that reshapes what your eyes are allowed to notice. Think about walking through a city with no specific intention. You might pass hundreds of signs, people, shops, and objects without remembering most of them. But the moment you are looking for something specific, everything changes. If your goal is to find a bookstore, your attention suddenly starts highlighting anything related to books. Signs that mention reading, windows that show shelves, even small clues in your peripheral vision begin to stand out. The environment is the same, but your visibility has been selectively upgraded. This happens because your brain uses top-down attention, meaning it prioritizes what matches your internal state over what is objectively present. Goals act like a blueprint for attention. They tell your brain what to care about and what to ignore. Without goals, your visual system would be overwhelmed by raw data. With goals, it becomes focused, but also biased. You stop seeing everything and start seeing only what fits the current mission. What is fascinating is how quickly this shift happens. You do not need repetition or effort. The moment a goal becomes active in your mind, your perceptual system begins adjusting. This is why when you decide to buy something specific, it suddenly feels like that product is everywhere. It was always there, but now your brain has tagged it as relevant, so it gets promoted into awareness more easily. This is often called selective attention, but that term does not fully capture how active the process really is. Your goals do not just help you choose what to focus on. They actually reshape the visibility of the world itself. It is not that you are ignoring other things consciously. It is that those things are being filtered out before they reach conscious awareness. Inside your brain, there is constant competition between signals. Everything in your environment is trying to enter your awareness, but only a small fraction succeeds. Goals act like priority signals that boost certain inputs while suppressing others. It is a dynamic ranking system that updates in real time based on what you currently care about most. This is why your perception feels so different when you are motivated versus when you are distracted. Motivation sharpens visibility. It increases the strength of relevant signals and reduces noise. Distraction does the opposite. It weakens the signal of your goal and allows unrelated inputs to take over. You are not just thinking differently in those states. You are literally seeing differently. Even more interesting is how goals can persist in the background. You do not need to actively think about them for them to influence perception. If you have a strong goal, like learning a skill or solving a problem, your brain continues to scan for related information even when your conscious mind is focused elsewhere. This is why insights often appear unexpectedly. Your attention system was already filtering the world in the background, waiting for a relevant match. There is also a feedback loop between goals and attention. The more you notice something related to your goal, the more important that goal feels. And the more important it feels, the more your brain prioritizes related information. Over time, this loop can make certain parts of reality feel larger and more dominant than others. Your experience of the world becomes shaped by what you repeatedly decide is important. This mechanism is powerful because it explains why two people can live in the same environment but perceive completely different realities. One person with a goal of opportunity sees possibilities everywhere. Another focused on risk sees problems everywhere. The external world is identical, but their internal goals are shaping what becomes visible to them. What makes this even more subtle is that goals are not always conscious choices. Sometimes they are emotional states, worries, desires, or unresolved thoughts. These background goals can influence attention just as strongly as deliberate ones. If you are anxious about something, your brain begins scanning for confirmation of that concern. If you are excited about something, your attention starts highlighting positive signals related to it. Your vision is constantly being guided by both what you choose and what you feel. The most important part of this system is that it is not stable. It changes as your goals change. That means your perception of reality is not fixed. It is flexible, constantly being rewritten by what you are trying to achieve or avoid. Your eyes are not just showing you the world. They are showing you the world filtered through intention. Once you understand this, it becomes clear that attention is not random at all. It is goal-driven at every level. And every time your goals shift, even slightly, the world you experience shifts with them. Not because reality changed, but because your brain decided that a different part of it matters more than everything else. The strange reason you miss obvious things right in front of you. Have you ever spent several minutes looking for your phone while it was sitting on the table the whole time? Or searched every room for your keys only to discover they were right in front of you? It feels ridiculous when it happens. You even ask yourself how you could possibly miss something so obvious. The strange truth is that your eyes did not fail you. Your brain did. In many cases, the object was visible the entire time, but your mind quietly decided it was not important enough to become part of your conscious awareness. That sounds impossible because we like to believe seeing is automatic. If something is in front of us, we assume we will notice it. But your brain does not work like a video camera recording every detail equally. It works like an editor with limited space, constantly deciding what deserves attention and what can safely be ignored. The shocking part is that this editing happens before you even realize you are looking. Every second, your eyes collect an enormous amount of visual information. Colors, shapes, faces, movement, shadows, reflections, and tiny details are all entering your visual system at once. Processing every single piece would overwhelm your brain almost instantly. So instead of showing you everything, your brain filters reality into a much smaller version that matches your current priorities. If something does not fit those priorities, it can disappear from your awareness, even while it remains directly in front of your eyes. One of the most fascinating demonstrations of this is something psychologists call inattentional blindness. During a famous experiment, participants were asked to count basketball passes between players. While they focused on counting, a person wearing a gorilla suit calmly walked through the middle of the scene, stopped briefly, and then walked away. Amazingly, many participants never noticed the gorilla at all. It was not hidden. It was not transparent. It was standing in plain sight. Yet their brains filtered it out because their attention was completely committed to another task. That experiment reveals something unsettling. Seeing and noticing are not the same thing. Your eyes may capture an image, but unless your brain decides it matters, it may never become part of your conscious experience. In other words, your awareness is not built from everything your eyes detect. It is built from everything your brain chooses to keep. Think about the last time someone pointed out a detail you had completely missed. Maybe there was a person standing nearby, an important word on a sign, or an object lying on the floor. The moment someone mentioned it, you suddenly wondered how you could have overlooked something so obvious. The answer is simple. Your attention was looking for something else, and everything outside that search became almost invisible. Your expectations also play a huge role in this process. If you expect your keys to be on the kitchen counter, your brain naturally focuses on places that match that expectation. If they are sitting on the dining table instead, your eyes may pass over them several times without truly noticing them. Your visual system is searching for a pattern, not simply scanning every object equally. Stress makes this effect even stronger. When you feel rushed, anxious, or overwhelmed, your attention becomes narrower. Instead of exploring the environment, your brain begins filtering more aggressively. It focuses on whatever seems most urgent, while ignoring everything else. Ironically, the harder you search under stress, the easier it becomes to miss what is right in front of you. Modern life takes advantage of this limitation every day. Designers know that people only notice a small fraction of what appears on a screen. That is why important buttons are placed in predictable locations, why notifications use bright colors, and why advertisements are carefully positioned where your eyes naturally travel. They are not trying to show you more information. They are trying to become one of the very few things that survive your brain's editing process. There is another surprising reason obvious things disappear: familiarity. When you see the same environment every day, your brain stops paying close attention to it because it assumes nothing important has changed. This saves mental energy, but it also means you can overlook new details hiding inside familiar places. Something can sit in your living room for days before you suddenly notice it, not because it just appeared, but because your brain finally decided it was worth processing. The most fascinating part is that this system is actually protecting you. Without it, every moment would feel chaotic. Every leaf, every shadow, every sound, and every tiny movement would compete equally for your attention. You would struggle to finish even the simplest task. Your brain filters reality because it has to. The problem is that the same system protecting you from overload can also hide important things that are sitting in plain sight. Once you understand this, you begin noticing something remarkable. Missing obvious things is not a sign that you are careless or distracted. It is evidence that your brain is constantly making invisible decisions about what deserves your awareness. Every glance is filtered through goals, expectations, emotions, and habits before it ever reaches your conscious mind. And perhaps the strangest realization of all is this: at any given moment, there are countless things directly in front of your eyes that you are not truly seeing. Not because they are hidden, but because your brain has quietly decided they do not exist, at least not yet. How expectations rewrite reality before you look. Before your eyes ever settle on an object, your brain has already started telling itself a story about what it expects to find. That might sound unbelievable, but it happens every second of your life. You think you are looking at reality first and interpreting it afterward. In truth, your brain often creates an expectation first and then uses your eyes to confirm it. By the time you feel like you are seeing the world, your mind has already rewritten part of it. Think about walking into your own bedroom in complete daylight. You never stop to inspect where the bed is, where the door should be, or where the window belongs. You simply know. Your brain has built such a strong prediction that it barely needs to process those details anymore. It fills in the blanks before your eyes even finish taking them in. Most of the time, those predictions are accurate. But when something changes, the illusion breaks. Imagine someone quietly moves a chair from one side of the room to the other while you are away. You walk back in, and for a few seconds you completely miss it. The chair is not hidden. It is sitting in plain sight. The reason you overlook it is because your brain is still showing you the room it expected to see rather than the room that actually exists. Only after your prediction fails does your attention suddenly snap toward the difference. This happens because your brain is constantly trying to save time and energy. Instead of rebuilding the world from scratch every single moment, it uses memory to predict what should already be there. These predictions allow you to move through life effortlessly, but they also create blind spots. Your eyes gather information, yet your brain quietly edits that information so it matches what it already believes is true. That is why expectations are so powerful. They do not simply influence what you think after seeing something. They influence what you notice in the first place. If you expect to find a friendly face in a crowd, your attention naturally becomes more sensitive to smiles and familiar expressions. If you expect danger, your eyes begin searching for suspicious movement, tense body language, and possible threats. The same environment suddenly feels completely different, even though nothing around you has changed. You have probably experienced this without realizing it. Imagine reading a sentence where one word is slightly misspelled. Most of the time, you never notice the mistake because your brain automatically corrects it. It already knows what the sentence is supposed to say, so it quietly fills in the missing pieces. You believe you read every letter exactly as it appeared, but in reality your expectations rewrote the information before it reached your awareness. The same thing happens with faces. If someone tells you that a stranger is kind and trustworthy before you meet them, you are more likely to notice their smile, relaxed posture, and warm expressions. If another person tells you the same stranger is dishonest, your eyes begin searching for signs that confirm that belief. Tiny movements suddenly seem suspicious. Neutral expressions feel colder than they actually are. The face has not changed. Your expectations have. This tendency is deeply connected to how the brain learns. Every experience you have ever had becomes part of a prediction library. Your mind stores patterns, compares them with the present, and constantly asks what is most likely to happen next. That system is incredibly useful because it allows you to react quickly without analyzing every detail from the beginning. But it also means your perception is never completely neutral. It is always influenced by what your brain believes should happen. Modern technology understands this remarkably well. Movie directors often build expectations before revealing an important scene. Advertisers carefully prepare your mind before showing a product. Social media headlines create assumptions before you even open the post. Once an expectation exists, your brain naturally begins searching for information that supports it. The prediction becomes a guide for your attention, quietly deciding what feels important and what fades into the background. There is another surprising effect that expectations create. They make familiar things almost invisible. When you walk the same road every day, your brain predicts nearly everything you will see along the way. As a result, countless details disappear from your awareness because they match the prediction perfectly. But the moment something unexpected appears, a fallen tree, a new sign, or a parked vehicle in an unusual place, your attention instantly locks onto it. Your brain is not reacting to the object itself. It is reacting to the failure of its own prediction. This explains why surprises feel so powerful. They force your brain to stop relying on expectations and return to direct observation. For a brief moment, your attention becomes sharper because the old mental model no longer fits reality. The world suddenly feels more vivid, not because it changed, but because your brain stopped filling in the blanks automatically. The most fascinating realization is that expectations are not your enemy. They are the reason you can move through life without becoming overwhelmed by endless information. They allow you to recognize people, navigate familiar places, and make quick decisions. But they also remind us that perception is never a perfect mirror of reality. It is a conversation between what is actually there and what your brain believes should be there. Once you become aware of this hidden process, you begin noticing something extraordinary. Every time you look at the world, you are not starting with a blank canvas. You are starting with a prediction, and long before your eyes tell you what is real, your expectations have already begun deciding what reality is going to look like. Why your eyes love patterns more than randomness. Look around you for just a moment. At first it seems like your eyes are simply taking in whatever happens to be there. A wall, a chair, a window, a few objects scattered across the room. It feels effortless, almost automatic. But behind that simple experience, your brain is doing something extraordinary. It is searching for patterns in everything you see. Not because it enjoys doing it, but because it cannot stop. Long before you consciously understand an image, your brain is already trying to organize it into something familiar. This is one of the hidden rules that quietly controls your attention every day. Your eyes are naturally drawn toward order, repetition, and recognizable structure. Randomness, on the other hand, is mentally expensive. It forces your brain to work harder because there is no obvious meaning to hold on to. Patterns make prediction easier, and prediction has always been one of the most valuable survival tools the human brain has ever developed. Imagine walking through a forest thousands of years ago. Every tree, every shadow, and every sound could carry important information. If your brain treated every leaf as completely unique, you would spend all your energy processing details that did not matter. Instead, it learned to group similar things together. Branches became branches, rocks became rocks, faces became faces. By recognizing patterns instead of isolated details, your brain could react faster and make better decisions. That same system is still running inside you today. The difference is that instead of forests, it now operates in cities, offices, classrooms, and on phone screens. Everywhere you look, your brain is asking the same silent question. Does this match something I already know? The moment the answer is yes, recognition becomes almost effortless. Your attention moves smoothly because the pattern feels predictable. This is why you can recognize a friend's face from a distance even before you see every detail. Your brain does not wait until every feature is perfectly clear. It notices a familiar pattern of movement, posture, hairstyle, and facial structure, then quickly fills in the rest. In many cases, you recognize the person before your eyes have gathered all the visual information. Your brain would rather complete an incomplete pattern than wait for perfect certainty. But there is another side to this ability that most people never think about. Because your brain loves patterns so much, it sometimes creates them, even when they are not really there. Have you ever looked at clouds and seen animals or faces? Or noticed a face in the front of a car or in the arrangement of windows on a building? Those objects were never designed to look human, yet your brain instantly organizes random shapes into something meaningful. It prefers finding a familiar pattern over accepting complete randomness. This happens because the cost of seeing a pattern that does not exist has always been much smaller than the cost of missing one that does. If something in the bushes looked vaguely like a predator, reacting quickly increased the chances of survival. Occasionally being wrong was far safer than ignoring a real danger. So your brain evolved to lean toward recognition instead of uncertainty. Patterns also make your attention more efficient. Think about reading. You are not examining every single letter one by one. Your brain recognizes entire words as familiar visual patterns. That is why you can read quickly without consciously analyzing each character. The more familiar the pattern becomes, the less mental effort it requires. Your eyes move faster because your brain already knows what it expects to see. This is also why routines feel comfortable. When your environment follows predictable patterns, your brain spends less energy trying to understand what is happening. Familiar streets, daily habits, and repeated experiences all create stable mental shortcuts. Randomness interrupts those shortcuts, forcing your attention to work much harder. That is why unexpected changes immediately grab your gaze. They break the pattern your brain was relying on. Modern technology takes advantage of this instinct constantly. Company logos are designed to be simple and recognizable because repeated exposure turns them into powerful visual patterns. Social media layouts stay remarkably consistent because familiar structures reduce mental effort and keep you engaged. Even movie scenes often use repeating visual elements to guide your attention without you realizing it. Your eyes naturally follow organized information more easily than chaotic information. There is an interesting balance hidden inside all of this. Your brain loves patterns, but it does not want perfect repetition forever. If everything stayed exactly the same, your attention would eventually fade because nothing new would need processing. That is why the most powerful attention grabbers often combine familiarity with a small surprise. A recognizable pattern with one unexpected change immediately becomes impossible to ignore. Your brain already understands most of what it is seeing, but that one difference demands explanation. The most fascinating part is that this process feels completely invisible. You never wake up thinking you are about to spend the day searching for patterns. Yet every face you recognize, every word you read, every object you identify, and every decision about where to look begins with this hidden system organizing the world into meaningful structures. Without it, everyday life would feel like endless visual chaos. Once you understand this, you begin to see your own attention differently. Your eyes are not wandering through the world at random. They are constantly hunting for order inside complexity, turning scattered pieces into recognizable stories before you even become aware of them. And that quiet search for patterns is one of the most powerful reasons your vision feels so effortless. Even though your brain is performing millions of invisible calculations every single second. The brain's shortcut for finding what matters fast. Every second of your life, your eyes are flooded with more information than your brain could ever process. Colors, shapes, faces, movement, shadows, reflections, words, and countless tiny details all compete for your attention at the exact same time. If your brain tried to examine every single piece equally, even the simplest moment would become impossible to understand. You would freeze under the weight of endless information. Yet somehow, that never happens. Instead, your mind almost instantly finds what seems most important. The question is how? The answer is that your brain does not carefully analyze everything before making a decision. It uses shortcuts, extremely fast mental rules that help it identify what probably matters without wasting valuable time. These shortcuts are not signs of laziness. They are the reason you can function in a world overflowing with visual information. Without them, every glance would feel like solving an impossible puzzle. Imagine walking into a crowded train station. Hundreds of people are moving in different directions. Signs cover the walls. Conversations overlap, lights flash. Bags, phones, advertisements, and changing displays are everywhere. Yet within seconds, your eyes manage to find the platform number you need, the friend you are meeting, or the exit you were searching for. It feels effortless because your brain quietly ignores thousands of irrelevant details before they ever reach your awareness. This happens through a process called selective attention. Instead of asking what everything is, your brain first asks what is most likely to matter right now. It compares incoming information with your current goals, your memories, your emotions, and your expectations. Anything that matches those priorities is pushed forward into awareness. Everything else is turned down, almost like lowering the volume on background noise. The incredible part is how quickly this happens. Long before you consciously decide where to look, your brain has already ranked the visual world by importance. Bright movement might rise to the top. A familiar face might jump ahead of everything else. A road sign might suddenly become impossible to miss because you are trying to find an address. The ranking changes constantly, adapting to whatever your mind believes is most relevant in that moment. This shortcut exists because speed has always mattered more than perfection. Imagine your ancestors walking through a forest. If they stopped to examine every leaf and every stone with equal attention, they would miss the movement of a predator or overlook the sound of approaching danger. Survival depended on making fast decisions with limited information, so the brain evolved to focus on probability rather than certainty. It asks what is most likely to matter instead of trying to understand everything at once. Of course, this system is not perfect. Sometimes it points your attention in the wrong direction. That is why you can overlook obvious objects while searching for something else. Your brain becomes so committed to one shortcut that it filters out information that does not match the current goal. The object is visible, but it never becomes consciously important because it does not fit the mental search pattern. This is also why experts notice things that beginners completely miss. A doctor can glance at a medical scan and immediately spot something unusual because years of experience have trained the brain's shortcuts. A professional photographer instantly notices lighting and composition. A skilled mechanic hears an engine for a few seconds and recognizes a problem that others cannot detect. Their eyes are not physically better. Their brains have simply built more efficient shortcuts for deciding what deserves attention. These shortcuts are constantly learning. Every experience strengthens certain pathways while weakening others. The more often something proves useful, the faster your brain begins recognizing it in the future. Over time, attention becomes increasingly personalized. Two people standing side by side may look at the exact same scene yet notice completely different details because their brains have developed different shortcuts based on different experiences. Modern technology understands this surprisingly well. Applications, websites, advertisements, and videos are all designed to compete for the limited space inside your attention system. They use bright contrast, familiar symbols, human faces, motion, and emotional expressions because they know these shortcuts already exist. They are not creating new rules for your attention. They are taking advantage of ancient ones that your brain has relied on for thousands of years. There is another fascinating side to these shortcuts. They become so efficient that you often mistake them for intuition. You suddenly feel that something is important without being able to explain why. Later, you realize your brain had quietly noticed a combination of small clues long before your conscious mind understood them. What feels like instinct is often your attention system recognizing meaningful patterns at incredible speed. The most remarkable part is that you almost never notice these decisions being made. You only notice the final result. You believe you simply looked at the right thing, when in reality your brain had already eliminated thousands of alternatives before your awareness even caught up. Every glance you take is the product of invisible calculations designed to save time, reduce effort, and keep you focused on what appears most valuable. Once you understand this hidden process, your perception of vision changes completely. You realize that your eyes are not wandering through reality at random. They are following an intelligent shortcut system that has been refined over countless generations, constantly deciding what deserves your attention and quietly hiding everything else. And perhaps the most surprising realization of all is that what feels like free choice is often your brain making those decisions long before you ever become aware of looking. How contrast quietly commands your attention. At first glance, it seems like your eyes move randomly across the world. You look here, then there, then somewhere else, almost without thinking. But if you slow the moment down, a hidden pattern begins to appear. Your attention is not wandering at all. It is constantly being pulled toward difference. Wherever something stands apart from its surroundings, your eyes are likely to follow. That invisible force is called contrast, and it quietly controls far more of your attention than you could ever imagine. Contrast is not just about black and white or light and dark. It is about anything that breaks the pattern. A bright object in a dull room, a quiet sound in a noisy crowd, a single person standing still while everyone else is moving. Your brain is built to notice differences because differences often carry information. The world is full of repeating patterns, but the things that stand out are usually the things that deserve a closer look. Imagine walking through a parking lot filled with rows of gray cars. Most of them barely register in your awareness. Then suddenly you notice a bright yellow car parked in the middle. It captures your attention almost instantly. The car is not necessarily more important than the others. It simply creates stronger contrast against the background. Your brain interprets that difference as something worth investigating before you even realize your eyes have moved. This reaction has deep evolutionary roots. For early humans, noticing contrast could mean the difference between survival and danger. A predator hiding in tall grass rarely matched its surroundings perfectly. A piece of ripe fruit often stood out against green leaves. A trail of disturbed plants signaled that something had recently passed through. The brain learned that what breaks the pattern deserves attention because it might carry valuable information. That ancient rule still operates today, even though your environment has completely changed. Instead of searching forests, your eyes move through cities, screens, and crowded spaces. Yet the principle remains exactly the same. Anything that creates strong contrast automatically rises to the top of your attention system. This is why designers, filmmakers, and advertisers rely so heavily on contrast. They understand that the brain naturally prioritizes difference over similarity. A single bright button on a simple web page attracts more attention than dozens of equally colored elements. A character wearing a vivid outfit immediately becomes the focus of a scene filled with neutral colors. Even silence can create contrast. In a room full of constant conversation, one sudden pause can pull everyone's attention without a single word being spoken. Contrast also affects emotional attention. Imagine hearing someone laugh during a serious meeting. The laughter immediately feels louder than it actually is because it violates the emotional pattern of the situation. The sound itself has not changed. What changed is the contrast between expectation and reality. Your brain notices the difference before it evaluates the meaning. There is another fascinating layer to this process. Your brain is always adapting to its surroundings. When everything around you is bright, brightness becomes normal and stops attracting attention. But introduce one darker object, and suddenly it becomes the focus. If everything becomes dark, then one bright object immediately stands out again. Contrast is never absolute. It depends entirely on what surrounds it. This explains why the same object can feel invisible in one situation and impossible to ignore in another. A white shirt barely attracts attention in a room where everyone is wearing white. Place that same shirt in a crowd dressed entirely in black, and it suddenly becomes the first thing your eyes notice. The object did not change. Only its relationship to everything around it changed. Your brain uses this shortcut because it is incredibly efficient. Instead of analyzing every detail equally, it quickly identifies what differs from the background and gives it priority. This saves enormous amounts of mental energy. It allows you to find important information rapidly without consciously searching every corner of your environment. But contrast is not always helpful. It can also be manipulated. Modern digital platforms compete relentlessly for your limited attention by creating stronger and stronger forms of visual contrast. Bright notifications, flashing icons, unexpected animations, and bold colors all exist for one reason. They interrupt the visual patterns your brain has become comfortable with. They do not ask for your attention. They quietly take advantage of the system that evolved to protect your survival. The remarkable thing is that you rarely notice this happening. You simply feel your eyes drifting toward whatever stands out. It feels natural because the process happens beneath conscious awareness. By the time you realize you are looking at something, your brain has already decided that its contrast makes it worthy of attention. Once you understand this hidden rule, everyday life begins to look different. You notice why certain signs instantly catch your eye while others disappear into the background. You begin to understand why some images feel unforgettable and others are forgotten almost immediately. Most importantly, you realize that your attention is not being controlled by the biggest object or the loudest voice. It is being guided by whatever creates the strongest difference at that particular moment. And that is perhaps the most surprising truth of all. Your eyes are not searching for everything equally. They are constantly hunting for contrast, quietly allowing the unusual, the unexpected, and the different to rise above the ordinary long before you ever realize you have started looking. Why novelty is impossible for your eyes to ignore. Think about the last time something completely unexpected caught your attention. Maybe it was a strange object on the side of the road, an unusual outfit in a crowded street, or a sound that did not belong in the environment. You were not looking for it. In fact, you were probably focused on something else entirely. Yet the moment it appeared, your eyes locked onto it almost instantly. It felt automatic because it was. Your brain is built to treat novelty as one of the highest priorities in the visual world. This happens because your attention system is not designed to search only for what is familiar. It is also constantly scanning for what is new. The moment something breaks the normal pattern of your surroundings, your brain treats it as potentially important. It does not matter whether that new thing is helpful, dangerous, or completely harmless. Before your conscious mind can judge it, your attention has already shifted in its direction. At first, this seems like a simple habit of curiosity, but underneath that feeling is a survival mechanism that has been shaping human behavior for thousands of years. Imagine living in a world where every unfamiliar sound, object, or movement could mean a new food source, an unknown animal, or an unexpected threat. Ignoring something new would have been risky. Paying attention to it increased the chances of survival. Your brain still follows that ancient rule today, even though most of the new things you encounter are far less dramatic. What makes novelty so powerful is that it interrupts prediction. Your brain spends every moment trying to guess what will happen next. It builds expectations based on your surroundings, your memories, and your previous experiences. When those expectations are confirmed, attention stays relatively calm because everything is unfolding as predicted. But the moment something unexpected appears, your prediction fails. That failure creates an immediate spike in attention because your brain needs to update its understanding of the world. Imagine walking the same route to work every day. After a while, the journey becomes almost effortless because your brain already knows what to expect. The buildings, the traffic, the familiar signs, and the people all blend into a predictable pattern. Then one morning you notice a giant sculpture that was never there before. Suddenly your eyes stop. Your attention shifts instantly. The sculpture is not necessarily more important than the buildings around it. It is simply new, and your brain cannot ignore what does not fit its expectations. This is why first impressions are often so powerful. When you meet someone with an unusual hairstyle, a distinctive voice, or a unique way of speaking, your attention naturally lingers. Novelty creates stronger mental processing because your brain has not yet built a shortcut for it. Familiar things require very little effort to understand. New things demand investigation. There is another interesting reason novelty captures your gaze. Your brain is always trying to learn. Every unfamiliar object represents possible information that could become useful later. By paying attention to new experiences, your mind expands its library of patterns and improves future predictions. In other words, novelty is not just attracting your attention. It is teaching your brain how to navigate the world more effectively. Modern technology understands this perfectly. Social media platforms constantly introduce fresh content because repeated information quickly loses its power to hold attention. News headlines emphasize what is new rather than what is already known. Advertisements frequently change designs, colors, and messages because the brain gradually adapts to familiar visuals. The moment something becomes predictable, it fades into the background. Novelty resets the attention system by making the environment feel uncertain again. But there is an important catch. Your brain does not want endless novelty. If everything around you were completely unfamiliar, your attention would become exhausted. You would struggle to make sense of the environment because there would be no stable patterns to rely on. That is why the most attention-grabbing experiences often combine familiarity with just enough surprise. They give your brain something recognizable while introducing one unexpected element that demands closer inspection. You can even notice this effect in conversations. Someone speaking in a completely predictable way gradually becomes easier to tune out. But introduce one unexpected idea, one surprising fact, or one unusual perspective, and attention immediately returns. Your brain treats that difference as a signal that something valuable might be happening. The fascinating part is that novelty does not have to be dramatic. Sometimes the smallest unexpected detail is enough. A different route home, a new expression on a familiar face, a single unusual word in an otherwise ordinary sentence. Tiny changes can trigger powerful shifts in attention because they force your prediction system to pause and reconsider what it thought it already understood. The most surprising realization is that your eyes are not simply searching for what is important. They are constantly balancing two competing needs. One is the comfort of familiar patterns that make life efficient. The other is the excitement of new information that helps you adapt and learn. Every glance is influenced by that invisible balance, quietly deciding whether the world needs stability or exploration. Once you understand this, everyday moments begin to feel different. You start noticing how often your attention is pulled not by the biggest object or the loudest sound, but by whatever feels just different enough to challenge your expectations. And in that realization, it becomes clear that novelty is not merely interesting. It is one of the oldest and most powerful commands your eyes have ever learned to obey. The silent competition between bottom-up and top-down attention, every moment of your life, an invisible battle is happening inside your mind. You never hear it. You never feel it directly, yet every single glance you make is influenced by it. One force is constantly pulling your attention from the outside world, while another is trying to push your attention toward what you already care about. Most people believe they control where they look. The truth is that these two systems are constantly negotiating behind the scenes, and whichever one wins determines what becomes part of your reality. Imagine sitting at your desk reading an important message. Your goal is clear. You want to stay focused. Then, without warning, something falls off a nearby shelf. Before you even realize what happened, your eyes have already turned toward the sound. You did not decide to look. Your attention was captured automatically. A few moments later, you return to your message because you remember what you were trying to accomplish. In just those few seconds, both attention systems took turns controlling your vision. The first system is driven by the outside world. Psychologists call it bottom-up attention. It reacts to things that naturally stand out, like sudden movement, bright colors, loud sounds, unexpected faces, or sharp contrast. It is fast, automatic, and almost impossible to ignore. This system evolved because our ancestors needed to react immediately when something unusual appeared in their environment. Waiting to think first could have meant missing a predator, an opportunity, or a life-saving warning. The second system works in the opposite direction. It begins inside your mind rather than outside it. This is called top-down attention. Instead of reacting to whatever is happening around you, it focuses on what you already intend to do. If you are searching for a friend in a crowded airport, your brain starts filtering faces based on the features you expect. If you are looking for your parked car, everything related to that goal suddenly becomes easier to notice. Your attention is no longer being pulled by the environment alone. It is being guided by purpose. The fascinating part is that these systems never stop competing. Even while you are concentrating on something important, bottom-up attention keeps scanning the environment for anything unexpected. At the same time, top-down attention keeps reminding your brain of the task you are trying to complete. Every second, your perception is shaped by whichever signal becomes stronger. This explains why focus can feel so fragile. You may have every intention of finishing a task, but one flashing notification is enough to steal your attention. That notification is not necessarily meaningful. It simply activates the automatic system before your goal-directed system has a chance to resist. A fraction of a second later, you find yourself checking your phone without remembering the exact moment your attention shifted. But the opposite can happen too. Think about reading a fascinating book inside a busy coffee shop. People are talking, cups are clinking, music is playing, yet somehow you barely notice any of it. Those sounds still reach your ears, but your top-down attention is so strongly committed to the story that most distractions never become conscious experiences. They exist around you, but they lose the competition for awareness. Scientists have discovered that these two systems are constantly exchanging information rather than working independently. If your goal is strong enough, top-down attention can suppress many outside distractions. But if something in the environment is unexpected enough, bottom-up attention can interrupt even your deepest concentration. Neither system has complete control all the time. Your experience of reality depends on the balance between them. This balance changes throughout the day. When you are tired, stressed, or emotionally overwhelmed, your top-down attention becomes weaker. Suddenly, every notification, every conversation, and every passing movement feels impossible to ignore. On the other hand, when you are deeply motivated and mentally engaged, your internal goals become powerful enough to filter out much of the surrounding noise. The world itself has not changed. Only the competition inside your attention system has. Modern technology is built around understanding this battle. Every application, advertisement, and platform competes to activate bottom-up attention through motion, color, sound, and surprise. At the same time, your own goals are trying to keep you focused on what actually matters. Every time you unlock your phone intending to complete one simple task, but end up spending 20 minutes doing something completely different, you have witnessed this invisible competition in action. The remarkable thing is that neither system is the enemy. Bottom-up attention protects you by making sure you notice important changes around you. Top-down attention allows you to pursue long-term goals without being constantly distracted. You need both to function. The challenge is that they are often trying to lead your eyes in completely different directions. Once you recognize this hidden battle, everyday life begins to make more sense. You understand why some distractions feel irresistible, why deep focus feels so valuable, and why your attention sometimes seems to have a mind of its own. Every glance, every shift in focus, and every moment of awareness is shaped by two silent forces working at the same time. And the reality you experience is often nothing more than the outcome of their endless competition. How habit programs your daily scanning patterns. Have you ever walked into your kitchen, opened the refrigerator, stared at everything inside, closed the door, and then realized a few minutes later that the item you were looking for had been right in front of you the whole time? It feels like your eyes somehow failed you. But they did not. Something else was in control. It was habit. And once habit takes over, your eyes stop exploring the world and start following a route that has already been programmed into your brain. Most people imagine habits as actions, like brushing your teeth or tying your shoes. But habits also shape the way you see. Every single day, your brain creates visual routines that determine where your eyes go first, what they skip over, and what never reaches your awareness at all. These routines become so automatic that you rarely notice they exist. You simply feel like you are looking naturally, when in reality you are repeating the same scanning pattern over and over again. Think about the moment you unlock your phone. Before you even decide what you want to do, your eyes often jump to the exact same places. Maybe you check the notification bar first. Maybe your attention immediately goes to a messaging app or a favorite social media icon. You are not consciously planning this sequence. Your brain has practiced it so many times that it now runs automatically. Your eyes follow the familiar path before your thoughts have a chance to catch up. This happens because the brain loves efficiency. Building a new visual strategy every time you enter a familiar environment would waste an enormous amount of energy. Instead, your brain creates shortcuts. It remembers where useful information usually appears and guides your eyes there automatically. The more often you repeat a behavior, the stronger that visual pathway becomes. Eventually, your attention starts moving without needing conscious instructions. Imagine entering your workplace every morning. You probably glance at the same clock, the same desk, the same computer screen, and the same chair in nearly the same order every single day. You are not making those decisions from scratch. Habit has already mapped the route. Your eyes are following a script written by repetition. This is why familiar environments can make you surprisingly blind. Once your scanning pattern becomes automatic, your brain stops checking areas it believes are unimportant. If someone places a new object in a spot you normally ignore, you may walk past it several times without noticing. The object is completely visible, but your habit has trained your attention to skip that part of the scene. The same thing happens while driving. At first, a new driver consciously checks every mirror, every sign, and every intersection. It feels mentally exhausting because nothing is automatic yet. But after months or years of practice, those visual checks become habits. The eyes move through the same sequence almost effortlessly. This allows the driver to react quickly without consciously thinking about every glance. Habit also explains why breaking routines feels uncomfortable. Imagine someone rearranges your kitchen overnight. Suddenly you reach toward the wrong cabinet, look in the wrong drawer, and instinctively scan places where objects no longer exist. Your eyes are following yesterday's map, even though today's environment has changed. It takes repeated experience before your brain updates the scanning pattern. What makes this even more fascinating is that habits are not just physical. They become mental filters. If you spend every morning reading negative news, your attention gradually becomes trained to notice problems throughout the day. If you constantly search for opportunities, your eyes begin spotting possibilities that other people overlook. Your repeated attention shapes future attention. The more often you look for something, the easier it becomes to find it. Scientists often describe this as automatic processing. Once a behavior has been repeated enough times, it requires very little conscious effort. Your brain hands control over to deeply learned neural pathways. This frees up mental resources for other tasks, but it also makes your attention less flexible. You become incredibly efficient at seeing what you expect while becoming surprisingly blind to what falls outside your routine. Modern technology quietly strengthens these visual habits. Applications keep buttons in familiar places because your eyes quickly learn where to look. Shopping websites arrange important information in predictable layouts so your attention follows a consistent path. Social media feeds encourage repeated scanning patterns until opening an application becomes almost automatic. The more familiar the pattern becomes, the less conscious effort it requires. The remarkable thing is that habit feels exactly like free choice. You believe you are deciding where to look, yet much of the decision has already been made through repetition. Every glance reinforces the next one. Every repeated scanning pattern becomes a little stronger. Over weeks, months, and years, These invisible routines quietly shape the way you experience the world. Once you recognize this hidden process, everyday life begins to look different. You notice that your eyes keep returning to the same places, following the same routes, and searching for the same kinds of information. You realize that attention is not only guided by movement, color, emotion, or curiosity. It is also guided by the quiet power of repetition. And perhaps the most surprising realization of all is that what you repeatedly choose to look at today is programming what your eyes will automatically search for tomorrow. Why emotional objects stay in your vision longer? Not everything you look at leaves the same impression. Some things disappear from your mind almost the moment you see them. Others seem to stay with you long after your eyes have moved on. A childhood photograph, a meaningful gift, a face filled with joy or sadness. Even a simple object can suddenly feel impossible to ignore if it carries emotional weight. It is easy to think this happens because you are choosing to pay more attention. But the truth is far more surprising. Your brain quietly gives emotional objects special treatment long before you consciously decide they matter. Imagine walking through a room filled with ordinary items. A chair, a lamp, a stack of books, and a family photo sitting on a table. Even if every object is the same size and equally visible, your eyes are far more likely to pause on the photograph. It is not because it is brighter or larger. It is because your brain instantly recognizes that it carries emotional meaning. The moment that happens, your attention changes. Your visual system is not designed to treat every object equally. It constantly asks one silent question. Does this matter to me? Emotional meaning is one of the fastest ways to answer that question. When something is connected to love, fear, happiness, loss, excitement, or hope, your brain assumes it deserves extra processing. Instead of quickly moving on, your attention lingers. You spend just a little more time looking, even if you never realize it. This ability evolved for a simple reason. Emotion often signals importance. Long before modern life, remembering emotionally significant events increased the chances of survival. A place where danger appeared, a person who could be trusted, or an experience connected with food or safety all became valuable memories. Your brain learned that emotional information should never be treated like ordinary information. That ancient system is still active today. When you see an object connected to a powerful memory, your brain immediately links the present moment with the past. A familiar song playing from a nearby speaker, a piece of clothing that reminds you of someone, a small souvenir from a memorable trip. These objects do more than enter your vision. They activate networks of memory and emotion at the same time, making your attention naturally stay with them longer. Scientists have found that emotionally meaningful information receives stronger processing in the brain than neutral information. Areas involved in emotion communicate closely with areas responsible for attention, creating a powerful partnership. Instead of simply recognizing an object and moving on, your brain keeps it active for longer because it might contain valuable information. The emotional connection tells your attention system that this is worth remembering. This is why emotional faces are so difficult to ignore. A smiling child, someone crying, or a face showing fear immediately captures your attention in a way that neutral expressions often do not. Your brain evolved to read emotions quickly because understanding another person's feelings could mean the difference between cooperation, conflict, or survival. Even today, emotional expressions quietly hold your gaze longer than ordinary objects around them. This effect also explains why advertisements often focus on emotion rather than information. A product alone may not capture your attention for very long, but connect that product with love, family, achievement, or excitement, and suddenly your brain gives it greater importance. The emotional story becomes attached to the object, making it much harder to forget. There is another fascinating reason emotional objects remain in your vision. They interrupt automatic processing. Most of the things you see every day are quickly categorized and pushed into the background because they feel familiar and emotionally neutral. But emotional objects break that routine. They encourage your brain to pause, evaluate, and connect what you are seeing with personal experiences. That extra processing creates the feeling that time briefly slows down around the object. You may have noticed this after receiving unexpected news. Suddenly, ordinary things around you seem strangely vivid. A message on your phone, a gift from someone important, a photograph on the wall. Your emotional state changes the value your brain assigns to these objects, causing your attention to stay with them longer than it normally would. The object itself has not changed. Its emotional significance has. This system is incredibly useful because it helps create lasting memories. The things that hold your attention longer are also more likely to be remembered later. Emotion acts like a signal telling your brain that this moment deserves to be stored. That is why emotionally meaningful experiences often remain vivid for years, while countless ordinary moments quietly disappear. The most interesting part is that this process feels completely natural. You never sense your brain assigning emotional value or extending your attention. You simply experience certain objects as more meaningful than others. By the time you become aware of looking, the decision has already been made beneath conscious thought. Once you understand this hidden process, you begin to notice something remarkable. Your eyes are not just following movement, color, or novelty. They are quietly following meaning. Every object connected to your memories, your relationships, your fears, and your hopes gains a silent advantage in the competition for your attention. And that is why some things seem to stay in your vision just a little longer, leaving a much deeper mark on your mind than everything else around them. The hidden influence of culture on where you look. Most people believe that seeing is universal. A tree is a tree. A face is a face. A crowded street looks the same no matter who is looking at it. But that belief hides something extraordinary. The truth is that two people can stand in the exact same place, look at the exact same scene, and come away with completely different experiences. Not because their eyesight is different, but because their culture has quietly trained their attention to notice different parts of reality. From the day you are born, your brain begins learning what deserves attention. Parents point at certain objects. Teachers emphasize certain details. Society rewards noticing some things while ignoring others. Over thousands of everyday moments, these lessons become automatic. Eventually, your eyes stop feeling like they are following habits. They simply feel like they are seeing the world naturally. But what feels natural is often something you have spent your entire life learning. Imagine walking into a busy marketplace in a country you have never visited. At first, everything feels overwhelming. Colors, sounds, signs, faces, and movements all compete for your attention. Someone who grew up there, however, moves through the same space effortlessly. Their eyes know exactly where to look. They instantly recognize familiar symbols, social cues, and important details that you completely miss. You notice what feels unusual. They notice what feels useful. This happens because culture teaches your brain what information is valuable. In some societies, people are encouraged to focus on individuals and their personal actions. In others, attention naturally expands to include relationships, surroundings, and the broader context. Neither approach is right or wrong. They are simply different ways of organizing attention based on years of shared experience. Researchers studying visual attention have found something fascinating. People from different cultural backgrounds often scan the same image in different ways. Some spend more time looking directly at the main subject, while others naturally examine the background and the relationship between objects before focusing on the center. Their eyes follow different paths, not because they consciously choose to, but because their brains have learned different priorities. Think about something as simple as eye contact. In some cultures, looking directly into another person's eyes is seen as confidence, honesty, and respect. In others, prolonged eye contact can feel uncomfortable or even disrespectful in certain situations. The eyes are performing the same action, yet the meaning behind that action changes dramatically depending on the cultural rules that shape the observer. The same influence appears in art, architecture, clothing, and communication. Your brain gradually learns which visual patterns carry meaning within your environment. Colors that symbolize celebration in one culture may represent mourning in another. Certain gestures instantly attract attention because you have been taught they matter. Someone from a different background may look directly at the same gesture and completely overlook its significance. Perhaps the most surprising part is that culture does not simply tell you what to think. It quietly influences what you notice before thinking even begins. If your attention never lands on a particular detail, you cannot consciously evaluate it. In that sense, culture acts like an invisible guide, steering your eyes toward some parts of reality while allowing others to fade into the background. Language also plays a subtle role in this process. The words you learn influence the categories your brain creates. When a language places importance on certain distinctions, your attention becomes more sensitive to them. Over time, repeated exposure strengthens these visual habits until they become automatic. You no longer feel like you are following cultural patterns. You simply feel like you are seeing what is there. Travel often reveals this hidden influence. People who spend time in unfamiliar cultures frequently notice how differently they begin observing the world. Small social behaviors, public spaces, food, clothing, and everyday interactions suddenly become fascinating because they do not match the attention patterns their brain expects. Slowly, with repeated exposure, new scanning habits begin to form. Your perception adapts because your attention learns new priorities. Modern technology has made this even more interesting. People across the world now share many of the same applications, videos, and digital experiences, yet cultural habits still shape how those experiences are interpreted. Two viewers may watch the exact same video, but focus on completely different details because their attention has been trained by different social experiences throughout life. The remarkable thing is that this process happens so quietly that you almost never notice it. You assume your way of seeing is simply the normal way of seeing. But beneath every glance is a lifetime of invisible lessons teaching your brain what deserves attention, what feels meaningful, and what can safely be ignored. Once you understand this, the world begins to feel much larger than before. You realize that your eyes are not only guided by biology, emotion, memory, or curiosity. they are also guided by the countless cultural experiences that have shaped your mind since childhood. Every glance carries traces of the environment that raised you, the people who taught you, and the values that quietly directed your attention long before you ever realized you were learning how to see. How your environment trains your attention without you knowing. You do not walk into a room and consciously decide how to look at it. You just look. Your eyes move, pause, shift, and lock onto certain things without you ever negotiating with yourself about where attention should go. It feels natural, almost automatic. But what feels like natural seeing is actually something that has been trained into you over time by the environments you spend the most time in. Every space you enter is quietly teaching your brain how to behave. Your home, your workplace, your phone screen, your commute, even the stores you walk through regularly. Each of them repeats certain visual patterns so often that your attention starts adapting without asking for permission. After a while, you are no longer learning the environment. The environment is learning you. Think about your own room. You probably know exactly where everything is without needing to search. But more importantly, your eyes have developed a specific route for scanning it. When you enter, you do not randomly inspect every corner. Your attention jumps to familiar anchor points: the bed, the desk, the phone charger, the usual places where something important might appear. You are not consciously planning this sequence. Your environment has shaped it through repetition. This happens because your brain is incredibly good at optimizing effort. If something in your environment rarely changes, your brain stops allocating strong attention to it. It assumes stability. That allows you to focus on anything new or unexpected. Over time, this creates a habit of ignoring the constant and only scanning for variation. You are not fully aware of it, but your attention becomes a system designed to save energy by trusting familiarity. Now think about environments that are constantly changing, like a phone screen or social media feed. Here, your attention behaves very differently. Instead of settling into a stable scanning pattern, your eyes keep moving, searching for updates, notifications, movement, or new content. The environment teaches your brain that something important could appear anywhere at any moment, so your attention never fully relaxes. It stays alert, always ready to shift. This is not accidental. Environments are powerful because they shape expectations. If your surroundings consistently reward certain behaviors, your attention learns to prioritize them. If a space constantly presents visual noise, your brain becomes trained to filter aggressively. If a space is calm and predictable, your attention becomes more relaxed and selective. You are always being shaped by what you repeatedly see, even when you are not trying to learn anything. Even subtle design choices influence this process. In a supermarket, essential items are often placed at eye level because your environment has trained your attention to scan that zone first. In a city, signs are positioned along predictable sight lines because repeated exposure has taught your brain where important information usually appears. Over time, these patterns become so familiar that you stop noticing the design itself. You only notice the result of your attention following it. There is also a powerful feedback loop happening. Your environment shapes your attention, and your attention then reinforces what your environment teaches you. If you frequently check a specific area for updates, your brain becomes even more sensitive to that area in the future. If something consistently appears in a certain location, your eyes start going there automatically. The more you repeat it, the more invisible the training becomes. This is why changing environments can feel disorienting at first. When you move to a new place or change your routine, your attention suddenly loses its learned shortcuts. You find yourself scanning more slowly, noticing things that feel unfamiliar, and missing details that others seem to catch instantly. Your brain is trying to rebuild its map of what matters. Until it does, everything feels slightly unpredictable. Even social environments train your attention in subtle ways. In some places, people are taught focus on faces and expressions. In others, attention is directed more toward actions, objects, or group behavior. Over time, your eyes begin to follow whatever your environment repeatedly emphasizes. You stop noticing how you learned it because it feels like simple observation. But it is actually trained perception. Noise and silence also play a role. In loud environments, your attention becomes more reactive, constantly scanning for sudden changes in sound or movement. In quiet environments, your attention becomes more stable and internally focused. The brain adapts to whatever level of stimulation it is exposed to most often, adjusting its sensitivity accordingly. The most interesting part of all this is that your environment does not need to actively instruct you. It does not need words or explanations. It only needs repetition. The same visual cues, the same patterns, the same structures appearing again and again are enough to rewire how you look at the world. Slowly, without noticing, your attention begins to mirror the structure of the spaces you inhabit. Once you understand this, you start seeing something important. Your attention is not just a personal trait. It is a reflection of where you spend your time. Every environment you live in is constantly shaping what you notice, what you ignore, and what feels important enough to look at. And most of the time, that shaping happens long before you realize you are being taught how to see. Why your eyes keep returning to the same places. You might not notice it happening, but your eyes rarely explore freely. Even when you think you are scanning a room or a screen, your gaze keeps circling back to the same spots, the same corner of a table, the same section of a phone screen, the same faces in a crowd. It feels like coincidence, but it is actually a deeply structured behavior. Your attention is not wandering randomly. It is being pulled by invisible anchors that your brain has quietly built over time. At the core of this pattern is something simple but powerful. Your brain does not treat all parts of your visual field equally. It assigns value to certain locations based on past usefulness. If something has been important in a specific place before, your brain increases the likelihood that it will check that place again. Over time, these high-value locations become mental shortcuts for attention. Your eyes begin to return to them automatically, even when nothing new is there. Think about how you use your phone. Most people do not consciously decide where to look first. Their eyes jump to familiar zones, notifications at the top, messaging apps in the center, a specific corner where updates usually appear. Even when nothing has changed, your gaze still checks those areas. It is not curiosity driving this behavior. It is expectation. Your brain has learned that important information tends to appear in those locations, so it keeps returning there just in case. This creates what you can think of as attention gravity. Certain spots in your visual field become stronger than others because they have been rewarded in the past. Every time something important appears in a location, that location gains more weight in your attention system. Your brain remembers not just what was important, but where it was important, and it uses that memory to guide future eye movements. This is also why familiar environments feel easy to navigate. When you enter a room you know well, your eyes do not need to search everywhere. They go straight to the places that historically contained useful information. The clock on the wall, the door, the desk, the usual seating area. These are not random choices. They are learned priorities shaped by repetition. Your brain is optimizing effort by reducing the need to explore. But this system also creates blind spots. Once your attention learns that certain areas are usually unimportant, it begins to ignore them almost completely. Even if something new appears there, it may go unnoticed at first because your eyes are not naturally drawn to that location anymore. This is why people often miss objects that are sitting in plain sight. The object is visible, but the location has been mentally downgraded. There is another layer to this phenomenon. Your eyes are constantly making tiny movements called saccades. These movements are not random. They are guided by a combination of goals, expectations, and learned patterns. Once your brain has decided that a certain location is important, it keeps sending your gaze back to it through these rapid shifts. It is as if your attention is double-checking familiar territory, making sure nothing significant has changed. Emotional significance strengthens this effect even further. If something meaningful has happened in a specific place, your brain tags that location as important. Even long after the event, your eyes may still return there more often than other areas. A seat where you once had an important conversation. A corner of a room where something memorable occurred. These places quietly pull your attention because they are tied to emotional memory, not just visual history. Modern environments intensify this behavior. Screens, apps, and digital interfaces are designed with consistent layouts. That consistency trains your brain to expect information in fixed positions. Over time, your attention becomes even more location-dependent. You are not just looking for information. You are looking for it in the same places it appeared before. The design reinforces the habit, and the habit reinforces the design. Even in dynamic environments, your brain tries to create structure. When there is too much visual information, it quickly establishes priority zones. Areas that seem more informative receive more frequent attention. Areas that feel less relevant are checked less often. This internal map is constantly updated, but it always tends toward efficiency. Your eyes return to where they believe the highest value information is most likely to appear. What makes this even more interesting is that you rarely experience this as a pattern. It feels like natural looking, but in reality, your visual attention is highly structured and repetitive. You are not freely scanning the world. You are revisiting a set of learned locations that your brain has labeled as important. Once you become aware of this, you start noticing something subtle but powerful. Your gaze is not evenly distributed across space. It is weighted. Certain areas pull your attention again and again, not because they are currently important, but because they have been important before. And in that repetition, your brain quietly builds a map of where attention should return next, long before you ever decide to look. How mental load shrinks your visual world. There are days when the world feels wide open. You notice small details, colors seem richer, and even ordinary places feel spacious in your awareness. Then there are other days when everything feels tight. You walk through the same streets, see the same rooms, but somehow miss things that would normally be obvious. It is not that the world has changed. It is that your mind is carrying too much to fully see it. Mental load quietly reshapes what your eyes are allowed to notice. When your brain is juggling too many thoughts, decisions, worries, or unfinished tasks, it does something very practical. It reduces the amount of information it tries to process from the outside world. In simple terms, it shrinks your visual world so it can survive the weight of your internal one. Imagine your attention system as a spotlight. Under normal conditions, that spotlight moves smoothly, illuminating different parts of your environment with ease. You can scan a room, notice details, and switch focus without much effort. But when mental load increases, that spotlight becomes narrower. It does not move freely anymore. It locks on to only the most relevant or urgent signals and ignores everything else. This is why stress and cognitive overload often make people feel like they are missing things right in front of them. It is not a failure of vision. It is a limitation of processing capacity. Your brain has a finite amount of attention resources, and when too much of that capacity is used internally, less remains for the outside world. Think about trying to find something while your mind is full of unfinished thoughts. You are thinking about a conversation you had earlier, a task you still need to complete, and something you are worried might happen later. While all of that is running in the background, your eyes are still moving, but they are not fully engaged with what they are seeing. They skim instead of explore. They pass over details instead of absorbing them. In this state, your brain prioritizes survival over exploration. It shifts into a mode where efficiency matters more than curiosity. Instead of processing everything, it starts filtering aggressively. Only high-priority information gets through. Everything else is treated as background noise, even if it is directly in front of you. This is why people often misplace objects when they are stressed. The object is visible, but the brain is not allocating enough attention to properly register it. You might look at the same surface several times and still not see what you are searching for. Not because your eyes are failing, but because your attention is overloaded with internal activity. There is also a narrowing effect that happens with mental load. Your visual attention becomes more tunnel-like. Instead of scanning broadly, it focuses on fewer areas. Peripheral details fade. Context becomes less important. You may still see the environment, but you are no longer fully sampling it. It is as if the resolution of your perception has been slightly reduced. This happens because your brain is constantly balancing two demands: internal processing and external awareness. When internal processing becomes heavy, like planning, worrying, or problem solving, it consumes more of your cognitive resources. To compensate, the brain reduces external input. It is not a choice. It is an automatic trade-off designed to prevent overload. Even simple tasks become affected by this shift. Reading a page, searching for an item, or navigating a familiar space can feel harder not because the task changed, but because your attentional bandwidth has narrowed. You are operating with fewer mental resources available for perception. Interestingly, this effect is not always negative. In some situations, mental load can actually improve focus by filtering out distractions. When your brain is heavily engaged in a task, irrelevant visual information can fade into the background. This is why people can become deeply absorbed in work or study and stop noticing noise or movement around them. The world has not disappeared. It has simply been deprioritized. But when mental load becomes too high, the system stops being selective and starts becoming restrictive. Instead of filtering distractions, it begins filtering almost everything. That is when perception feels dull, narrow, or incomplete. You are no longer fully present in the environment because too much of your attention is tied up elsewhere. The most important part of this process is that it feels completely natural. You do not experience it as a shrinking of attention. You just feel slightly less observant, slightly more distracted, or slightly slower at noticing things. But underneath that subtle feeling, your entire visual experience has been compressed. Once you understand this, everyday moments start to make more sense. The times you missed something obvious. The times your environment felt unfamiliar, even though nothing had changed. The times you felt like you were not fully seeing what was in front of you. These are not random lapses. They are signs that your internal world had temporarily become louder than the external one. And in that quiet trade-off between thought and perception, your eyes are always adjusting, always adapting, and always trying to show you a world that fits the limits of what your mind can currently handle. The difference between seeing something and actually noticing it. Right now, you are surrounded by more visual information than your brain can ever fully process. Objects, colors, shapes, movement, light, and detail are all entering your eyes at the same time. But here is the strange part. You are not actually aware of most of it. You think you are seeing the world, but in reality, you are only noticing a small filtered fraction of it. And the difference between those two things, seeing and noticing, is where most of your perception quietly disappears. Seeing is automatic. It is what your eyes do whenever they are open. Light hits your retina, signals are sent to your brain, and a raw image is created. But noticing is something else entirely. Noticing requires attention. It requires selection. It requires your brain to decide that something matters enough to enter conscious awareness. Without that extra step, an object can be fully visible and still completely absent from your mind. Think about the last time someone pointed something out that you had been looking at for several seconds without realizing. Maybe it was a word in a sentence you kept rereading, or an object sitting on a table right in front of you. The moment someone mentioned it, it suddenly became obvious. You did not gain new vision. You gained attention. And that shift is what turns invisible sight into conscious awareness. Your brain is constantly filtering reality because it cannot handle everything at once. Millions of bits of visual data arrive every moment, but only a tiny portion makes it into your awareness. The rest is processed in the background or ignored entirely. This filtering is not a flaw. It is a survival mechanism. Without it, your experience of the world would be overwhelming noise instead of usable information. This is why two people can look at the same scene and have completely different experiences. One person might immediately notice a face in a crowd. Another might focus on movement or color. The scene is identical, but their attention is different. What you notice is not determined by what is present. It is determined by what your brain decides is important enough to highlight. One of the most fascinating examples of this difference is inattentional blindness. In studies, people are asked to focus on a specific task, like counting passes between players in a video. While they concentrate, something completely unexpected happens in plain view. Many participants do not notice it at all. Not because it is hidden, but because their attention is fully occupied elsewhere. The brain simply does not promote it into awareness. This shows something important. Attention is not evenly distributed across your visual field. It is selective, directional, and limited. When attention is focused on one thing, everything else becomes less likely to be noticed, even if it is clearly visible. Your eyes may register it, but your awareness does not. There is also a timing difference between seeing and noticing. Seeing happens continuously, every fraction of a second. Noticing happens in bursts, whenever your brain decides something crosses a threshold of importance. That threshold can change instantly based on your goals, emotions, expectations, or even fatigue. What you fail to notice in one moment might become obvious in the next simply because your internal state has shifted. This is why stress can make you miss obvious things. When your mind is overloaded, your attention becomes narrow. You are still seeing, but fewer things are being promoted into awareness. The brain prioritizes what seems immediately relevant and lets everything else fade into the background. That is why you can search for something in a room and overlook it repeatedly, only to find it instantly when your mind relaxes. Familiarity also plays a major role in this difference. When you see the same environment every day, your brain stops actively noticing it. It assumes nothing important has changed. So it shifts into a kind of background mode where it only highlights differences instead of everything present. That is why new objects stand out immediately while familiar ones blend into invisibility. Even emotions influence what you notice. A neutral object might go completely unnoticed in one state of mind, but become highly visible in another. If something carries emotional meaning, your brain elevates it into awareness more easily. This is why personal significance can make ordinary objects feel impossible to ignore while everything else fades away. The most surprising part is that noticing feels effortless. You do not experience it as a decision. It simply feels like reality presenting itself clearly. But beneath that feeling is a complex filtering system constantly deciding what deserves your awareness and what does not. You are never seeing everything equally. You are always experiencing a curated version of the world. Once you understand this, something subtle changes. You begin to realize that your perception is not a perfect reflection of reality. It is a spotlight moving across an ocean of information, illuminating only what your brain has chosen to highlight. And everything else, even if it is right in front of you, quietly exists outside of awareness until attention gives it permission to appear. Why peripheral vision knows more than you think? You probably think your vision works like a spotlight. Whatever you directly look at feels sharp, detailed, and complete, while everything on the sides feels blurry and unimportant. That seems like proof that peripheral vision is weak, almost like background noise your brain ignores. But that assumption hides something surprising. Your peripheral vision is not just passive. It is constantly collecting information, detecting patterns, and influencing your attention long before you consciously realize anything is happening. The center of your vision, called foveal vision, is designed for detail. It is what you use to read text, recognize faces, and inspect objects closely. But it is slow compared to the rest of your visual system. It can only focus on a very small area at a time. Everything outside that narrow focus is handled by peripheral vision, which covers most of what your eyes can actually see at any moment. Even though it is less detailed, it is far more sensitive to change, motion, and unexpected signals. Think about walking down a busy street. You might be looking straight ahead, focused on where you are going. But suddenly, something off to the side makes you turn your head. You did not consciously decide to notice it first. Your peripheral vision detected a change before your awareness caught up. That system is constantly scanning the environment for anything that breaks the expected pattern. Movement, contrast, flashing light, or unusual shapes immediately stand out even when you are not directly looking at them. This is because peripheral vision is deeply tied to survival systems in the brain. It acts like an early warning network. Long before you can clearly identify what something is, your peripheral system is already asking whether it might matter. Is it moving? Is it approaching? Is it different from everything else around it? If the answer is yes, your attention gets pulled toward it automatically. What makes this even more interesting is that peripheral vision does not just detect threats, it also builds context. While your central vision is focused on a single point, your peripheral vision is mapping everything around it. It tracks spatial relationships, general layout, and overall structure of your environment. This means that even when you are not looking at something directly, your brain still has a rough understanding of where it is and how it fits into the scene. For example, when you are reading a book, your central vision is locked onto the words, but your peripheral vision is still aware of the room around you. It knows where the table is, where the wall is, and if someone enters the space. You are not consciously paying attention to those details, but your brain is still collecting them in the background. That is why you can be deeply focused and still notice when something changes in your environment. This hidden awareness becomes especially powerful in motion detection. Peripheral vision is extremely sensitive to movement because movement often signals something important. A shadow shifting, a person walking past, or an object falling all stand out more strongly in your peripheral field than in your central focus. This is why you sometimes notice movement before you understand what it is. Your brain reacts first, then explains later. There is also a fascinating limitation built into central vision that makes peripheral input even more important. Your brain does not process high detail everywhere at once. It constantly shifts your focus through rapid eye movements, called saccades, to sample different parts of the world. Between these shifts, peripheral vision fills in the gaps, maintaining a continuous sense of space, so you never feel like the world disappears when your eyes move. This creates a subtle illusion. It feels like you are seeing everything clearly all the time, but in reality, only a small portion of your vision is ever in high detail. The rest is reconstructed and interpreted by your brain using peripheral input. In a way, your peripheral vision is not just supporting your sight, it is helping build the entire experience of visual reality. Modern environments often take advantage of this system. Bright notifications, moving elements on screens, and sudden changes in visual layout are designed to activate peripheral awareness. Even when you are not directly looking at them, they compete for your attention by triggering the brain's sensitivity to change. That is why it can feel impossible to ignore movement on a screen, even when you are trying to focus elsewhere. Another overlooked aspect is how peripheral vision influences intuition. Sometimes you get a feeling that something in your environment has changed before you consciously identify what it is. That feeling often comes from subtle signals detected in your peripheral field. A shift in lighting, a new object placed in the room, or a slight movement at the edge of your vision can all be registered without direct awareness, yet still influence your sense of what is happening. The most surprising part is that peripheral vision is always active. Even when you are deeply focused on one point, it is never turned off. It is continuously scanning, updating, and alerting your brain to anything that might require attention. You are not just seeing what you look at. You are also being informed by everything you are not looking at. Once you understand this, your experience of vision becomes more complex than it first appears. What feels like a narrow focus is actually supported by a wide, silent system constantly feeding you information, and much of what you think you consciously notice has already been prepared for you by a part of your vision you rarely pay attention to at all. How tiny visual cues quietly guide your decisions. You usually think decisions come from thinking. You weigh options, compare outcomes, and then choose. That is how it feels from the inside. But in reality, many of your choices begin long before you are aware of making them. They begin with something far smaller and quieter. A slight change in color, a familiar shape, a subtle direction of light, tiny visual cues that your brain processes in milliseconds, shaping your behavior before logic ever enters the picture. It is easy to underestimate how much influence these small details have. After all, they do not shout for attention. They do not demand anything. They simply exist in the background of your vision. But your brain is constantly reading them, even when you are not consciously focused on them. Every glance contains hidden information that your mind interprets automatically, and that interpretation gently nudges your next action. Think about walking into a supermarket. You might believe you are freely deciding what to buy, but your attention is being guided by countless subtle signals. Products at eye level feel more important than those below. Bright packaging feels more appealing than dull packaging. Items placed at the end of aisles feel more significant simply because they interrupt your visual path. You are not analyzing these cues. You are absorbing them instantly, without effort. This happens because your brain relies on shortcuts. It does not evaluate everything with equal depth. Instead, it uses visual cues as signals for importance. If something looks easier to process, more familiar, or more visually prominent, your brain assumes it might also be more relevant. That assumption often happens before you even realize you are looking at a choice. Even something as simple as direction can influence behavior. When objects point toward something, your attention tends to follow that direction. Arrows, lines, edges, and even the orientation of a face or body can subtly guide your eyes toward specific areas. You might not notice it consciously, but your attention naturally drifts along these visual paths as if they are quietly suggesting where to go next. Color is another powerful cue. Warm colors like red and orange tend to feel more urgent or attention-grabbing. Cooler colors like blue and green often feel calmer and more stable. Your brain associates these patterns with past experiences, even if you are not aware of it. As a result, color can influence how quickly you respond to something or how important it feels in a given moment. There is also the effect of contrast. An object that stands out from its surroundings immediately feels more significant. A single bright icon on a muted background will almost always attract attention first. This is not a conscious decision. It is your visual system prioritizing information that breaks the pattern of what came before. That difference signals potential importance, so your brain elevates it automatically. What makes this even more subtle is that these cues often stack together. A button on a screen might be slightly brighter, slightly larger, and placed in a more central position. Individually, each change feels minor, but together, they create a strong pull on your attention. By the time you realize you are focusing on it, your brain has already decided it matters more than other options nearby. These effects are not limited to shopping or digital environments. They appear in everyday social situations as well. The way someone stands, the direction they face, or the objects they hold can all influence where your attention goes and how you interpret the situation. A person leaning slightly toward you feels more engaging than someone leaning away. A gesture that points toward an object can make that object feel more relevant without any verbal explanation. Even in conversations, visual cues quietly shape decisions. Eye contact can signal importance. A pause in movement can draw attention to a moment. Small facial expressions can shift how seriously you interpret what is being said. You are constantly reading these signals without consciously translating them into meaning. They bypass analysis and go straight into perception. The most important thing to understand is that these cues do not force decisions. They guide probability. They make certain choices feel slightly more natural, slightly more noticeable, or slightly more appealing than others. Over time, those small shifts add up. What feels like a personal decision is often the result of many tiny visual influences aligning in the same direction. This is why environments matter so much. The spaces you spend time in are constantly shaping how you think without using words. Clean, organized spaces encourage different attention patterns than cluttered, chaotic ones. Bright, dynamic environments guide your focus differently than calm, minimal ones. You are always being subtly trained by what surrounds you. The most fascinating part is that your brain never tells you this is happening. It simply presents the final result. You feel like you noticed something important and then decided to act. But beneath that feeling, your attention has already been guided through a network of visual cues that shaped your perception long before you became aware of them. Once you understand this, everyday life starts to look different. You begin to notice that your attention is not as independent as it feels. It is constantly being shaped by small details that you never consciously registered. And in that realization, it becomes clear that your decisions are not only made by thought, but also quietly guided by the invisible language of what your eyes happen to see first. What your eye movements reveal about the way your mind works. You probably think of your eyes as simple observers, just pointing at things, while your mind does all the real thinking behind the scenes. But your eye movements are not passive at all. They are one of the clearest windows into how your mind actually works in real time. Every shift in gaze, every pause, every rapid jump between objects is quietly revealing what your brain considers important, what it is ignoring, and what it is trying to figure out next. Even before you are consciously aware of a thought, your eyes often act it out first. If you are searching for something, your gaze starts scanning in a structured way. If you are confused, your eyes move more erratically. If you are focused, your eyes become more stable and selective. These patterns are not random behavior. They are external expressions of internal processing. In a way, your eyes are constantly leaking information about your thoughts. One of the most revealing aspects of eye movement is how quickly it reacts to attention shifts. You do not need to decide to look at something for your eyes to move toward it. The moment something becomes relevant, even slightly, your gaze begins to drift in that direction. This is because attention and eye movement are tightly linked. Where your mind goes, your eyes tend to follow almost instantly. Think about reading a page of text. Your eyes do not move smoothly across the lines. They jump in small, rapid movements called saccades, pausing briefly at certain points. Those pauses are not random. They are moments where your brain is extracting meaning. Longer pauses often indicate more processing effort. Shorter pauses suggest familiarity or ease of understanding. Without realizing it, your eye movements are mapping your level of comprehension in real time. This same principle applies when you look at complex scenes. Your eyes do not treat every part equally. They jump between areas that seem important, forming a pattern that reflects your internal priorities. If you are looking for a friend in a crowd, your eyes will repeatedly return to faces that match your expectations. If you are assessing a situation, your gaze will focus on areas that seem most informative. Your mind is essentially directing a visual search strategy, and your eyes are carrying it out. There is also a strong connection between eye movement and memory. When you recall something, your eyes often move in ways that resemble how the original scene was observed. Even when nothing is in front of you, your gaze can shift as if you are reconstructing the spatial layout of a past experience. This suggests that memory is not just stored in abstract form. It is linked to the same systems that control how you look at the world. Emotion adds another layer to this relationship. When something is emotionally significant, your eyes tend to fixate longer and return to it more often. This is not just because you care about it. It is because your brain is prioritizing it for deeper processing. Emotional relevance acts like a signal that tells your visual system to slow down and take in more detail. Your eye movements also reveal uncertainty. When you are unsure about something, your gaze often becomes more scattered. You may look back and forth between options, as if your brain is trying to compare possibilities in real time. This back and forth pattern is a visible sign of decision-making. It shows your mind is still weighing information before settling on a conclusion. Interestingly, eye movements can even reveal what you are thinking about before you act on it. In many cases, your eyes will briefly land on an object you are about to choose before you consciously decide to choose it. This suggests that decision-making often begins at a subconscious level, and your eyes are one of the first places where that decision becomes visible. In social situations, eye movement becomes even more complex. You constantly shift between faces, gestures, and objects, gathering information about intent, emotion, and context. Where you look, how long you look, and how often you return to certain points all reflect how you are interpreting the situation. Your eyes are not just observing social reality, they are actively decoding it. What makes all of this even more fascinating is that you rarely experience these movements as meaningful. They feel automatic, almost invisible. But if you could see a map of your eye movements over time, it would look like a detailed blueprint of your attention. It would show your curiosity, your confusion, your priorities, and even your emotional reactions. The most surprising part is that you are not in full control of this system. You can guide your eyes deliberately, but much of the time they are being directed by processes you are not aware of. Attention, memory, emotion, expectation, and habit all influence where your eyes go before conscious thought has a chance to intervene. Once you understand this, something shifts in how you see yourself. Your eye movements are no longer just physical actions. They become a kind of silent language your mind is constantly speaking. Every glance is a small piece of evidence about what your brain is doing underneath the surface. And if you pay attention closely enough, you begin to realize that your eyes are not just seeing the world. They are revealing the hidden structure of your thoughts as they happen.